Yes, yeah. So
And I was putting like
nice to get
$5 a
some
week.
apartments
Yeah.
in there.
Well, $5 a pay check.
Paid every year.
All right,
Live.
council, the light is on. If you're all set. I'd like to bring tonight's meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of
Pledge
Allegiance.
allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is swearing in of appointed official. Would Christine Kane please come forward to be sworn into office? Please raise your right hand. I, Christine Kane,
I, Christine Kane,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and will obey the laws of the United States
and will obey the laws of the United States
and of the state of Maine,
and of the state of Maine,
that I will in all respects
that I will, in all respects,
observe the provisions
observe the provisions
of the Charter and ordinances
of the Charter and ordinances
of the Town of Lisbon,
of the Town of Lisbon,
and will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of Town Councilor.
of Town Councilor.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Next item is roll call. Councilor Moore,
Here.
Councilor Robichaud,
Yeah.
Councilor LaRochelle,
Here.
Councilor Lunt,
Here.
Councilor Fellows,
Here.
Councilor Smith,
Here.
Councilor Kane.
Here.
Next item, whenever you're ready.
All right. First item is good news and recognition.
Anybody at the council have any good news and recognition? Seeing none, I'd like to add, had an opportunity to go down and watch our parade, our Memorial Day parade, and the events that happened down at the MTM Center. And I thought it was just one of the best events I've seen for that particular weekend and forever. I just say, Council Moore, was it 200 to 300 people down for the event at the MTM?
Yep.
It was a huge turnout, and then later on in the evening there was a car show at Rumble Park that was just really well attended. And someone actually came up to me and said, "This is a great day for Lisbon. Just all kinds of stuff happening and seeing people out and about." And after the last couple of years we've had, I think that's actually good stuff, right? So hopefully that's just a start to what Moxie Weekend's going to be for. So perfect. Thank you.
I do want to mention the girls track team, I believe, took state's Class C championship. So congratulations to them.
Very nice.
So maybe there'll be something forthcoming from the council on that.
There should be.
And now that I think of it, I'd like to just mention Public Works for the active tearing up of sidewalk and re-putting down sidewalk in Lisbon. It's coming. Look, a lot of work been done there.
Absolutely. Should make that much improvement up there, right?
Yes.
With that being said, next item, please.
All right. Next item is public hearings. Once the chair opens the public hearing, those present who wish to speak, please approach the lectern to address the council chair. Please use the microphone and state your name for the record. First item, medical marijuana registered caregiver retail store for Lisbon Cannabis.
I'll open that public hearing if there's anybody here to speak. Yes, sir.
Hi there. My name is Paul Griesbach. I live at the corner of Main and High, 57 Main Street,
Thank you, Mr. Griesbach. Can you please speak into the microphone?
which is the former Baptist church. And I would like to speak on the cannabis use. And I've got no serious issues with, no issues at all with the proposal and what exists in town. My question is, do you know of any other pending applications? And that leads to the question of whether you have any sense of limiting the number of cannabis operations. because it's a concern, I think, of people that I've talked to, that there's a growing number of them, and maybe it's not exactly the culture that the town's interested in promoting. And I'm wondering if you'd consider a moratorium on future cannabis operations until the idea of a cap could be addressed. Some towns have looked at how the town voted during the referendum, and I think Lisbon was equally split. So it wasn't that, some towns definitely did not favor cannabis operations and have severely restricted them. That's not where Lisbon is. And I respect that. And people have come in and they've improved properties, and I think that's great. But is there ever enough is enough? And it's not so much cannabis. It could be the same if there were a proliferation of liquor stores or other uses. So I just wonder if the town has thought about that, and what the philosophy is in terms of where these end up, because I think any of the open venues, any open properties are not really people that are doing cannabis can come in with a lot of money, I think, and outbid people. So I don't know if it's a fair playing field for what we may regret that in the future. So I'm wondering where you are on this, or if you've thought about it, or where we are.
We can. I mean, during the public hearing part of it, we usually hear just from the public part, but when we do actually address it later on in the agenda, we'd be more than happy to add and give you an update where we're at with that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody from the public have anything else to add on this particular public hearing? See no movement. We'll close the public hearing and move on to the next item, please.
Thank you. Next item is adult use marijuana retail store for River Driver Cannabis.
I'll open that public hearing. Anybody have any interest in speaking? Seeing no movement, we'll close that public hearing. Next item, please.
Next item is audience participation and response for agenda items. At this time, those in the audience who wish to speak may approach the lectern to address items or issues that are on the agenda. Please use the microphone and state your name for the record.
Anybody that wants to speak on agenda items, this is your opportunity. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Bill Cool. I'm here tonight in my current capacity as chair of the Lisbon Planning Board. Later down on the agenda items under the council orders is Planning Board request for planning services. Recently, we've had several issues that came to our attention on Planning Board, rural open space, two amongst them, some time ago when I was new on the Planning Board, when we were dealing with the marijuana regulations. And it's occurred to us that we are working with one hand tied behind our back. Many of the members of Planning Board, all but one, have jobs elsewhere, doing other things in other places. I myself work in Augusta, so getting here sometime I bend some of the speeding laws that are involved here.
Don't say that.
So we are asking the council's permission to access funding so we may bring in a planning service on an as-needs basis. There are several issues that we have dealt with recently that would have been, I hope, dealt with more expeditiously with the input of an outside planning person to give us the point of view of other towns, the time to do the research that we do not have ourselves, and to give us some guidance in some of these issues that are technically sophisticated and issues coming down the pike, like we are aware of certain flaws, or not flaws, but changes within the comprehensive plan to reflect Lisbon as it is, not Lisbon as it was when the comprehensive plan was drafted some years ago. So when this topic comes up for debate later on, I would just ask you to keep that in mind.
Yep, and you're not going anywhere, right? You'll be here for that discussion, and I'm sure we'll bring you forward at that point in time.
If someone would bring in a pizza, that'd be nice, but no, I'll be here.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Anybody else for anything on the agenda? Seeing no movement. Next item, please.
Next item is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered routine and will be considered for adoption by one motion with no separate discussion unless a councilor requests an item be removed. Any councilor wishing to remove an item may do so now.
I would like to make a recommendation that we actually remove G and actually have that as a separate vote. Any,
We don't need to vote on this, but if we have a general consensus? Okay. All right. Order 2022-128 to approve municipal accounts payable warrants, $370,781.04. Municipal payroll warrants, $343,781.04. School accounts payable warrants, $176,421.57. School payroll warrants, $479,896.47. The minutes of the May 10th council meeting to set a public hearing for June 21st for an itinerant vendor license for Red Barn Incorporated and for a special entertainment permit for Frank's. Moving G to a separate vote, we'll also, in the consent agenda, move to approve the adult use marijuana retail store for River Driver Cannabis.
I'll make the motion that we approve.
I'll second that.
all those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0. All right. Taking up item G, medical marijuana registered caregiver retail store for Lisbon Cannabis.
Entertain a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
And we have one abstention, I assume? Okay. Counselor Smith abstains. Order passed. Vote is 6-0.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next order is council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. We'll start with agenda items 2022-129, 130, and 131. 129, the CDBG facade grant request for 19 Main Street, the Beauty Box Salon. 2022-130 is CDBG facade grant request for 671 Lisbon Street, formerly the Good Time Lanes. And 2022-131 is the CDBG facade grant request for 231 Lisbon Street, all clean carpet.
Good evening. Nice to see you all again. Ross Cunningham, Economic Community Development Director. Excited to bring some projects forward and pick up where some of the things have sat stagnant for several months. The first one you have is the Main Street Beauty Box Salon. She is putting up a awning over their building. It's a simple project, $5,000. We'll be supporting half of that, $2,500. So that's pretty straightforward. Second one is formerly the Good Time Lanes at 671 Lisbon Street. That one's a bit more of a challenge. It's a two-story project. We can only fund facade improvements on the story that currently exists, so we have to be really careful there. And today, unfortunately, we discovered a spot that was missed in that this particular project, by the letter of our town law for our town application process for this grant, doesn't actually meet the guidelines. Discovered that today, in that it does not include 50% of the building being commercial, because it's mostly residential. The property owner has design plans with a large section of the lower level to be a commercial space. So in addition to approving the CDBG grant today, I'd also like to ask you to approve a variance, essentially to ask that we approve this project, allowing him to keep 25% of the first floor as commercial. I'm concerned that if we take that opportunity away and we don't give him this grant, that building will be all residential, which is fine, but this gives us an opportunity to put another commercial storefront on 196, and I think that's really valuable to us, and also gives us some input on the design of this project, which I think helps a lot as well. So in addition to the request that's on your books already to approve the CDBG facade grant for $20,000, I'd also like you to consider amending the Town of Lisbon CDBG guidelines with a one-time variance for the property at 671 Lisbon Street by reducing the required commercial space from 50% to 25% of the main level in order to increase commercial opportunities along the Route 196 corridor. So that goes with the second one, and I believe Lisa has the wording for that if we need to come back to that. And then the third one is for 231 Lisbon Street. That is all clean carpet. That's formerly the recycling center down in Lisbon Village. The plan on that is to do new windows, new doors, new siding all the way around, really improve the property quite a bit. So I'm excited to see all three of these projects move forward. add some splash to Main Street, and add some real quality looks to 196 and to the village area.
Excuse me, Ross, could you actually just touch base on, so people that are watching could actually understand the process? So this wasn't a simple process, it's been ongoing?
That's correct.
And it's
So
an
they
application process.
applied for these sometime last fall. You have to get, first of all, you have to get the Lisbon Development Committee reviews them, approves the projects, and then we look at the funding and we send off for a historical waiver to make sure it's not historical property. Once we get that approval back, we then have to send in an environmental review, which is several pages of information on wetlands and all that stuff, and we just got that back this week. I sent that in my first week to try to get this ball rolling. Got that back this week, so that's approved. The next step for these is once you've approved these this evening, we will put 2 of the 3 projects that are over 10,000. We'll put those out to bid. We'll get 3 bids from different contractors for each one of these projects. I'll come back to you with those bids and the bid we've selected. You'll approve that, and then the project can move forward. And at that point, they'll invest their own money, and they'll come back to us with money invested, and we'll reimburse them based on the grant funds that we have in the pot.
All right, so what I recommend for council, actually take these one at a time, and then we can discuss them as we go. So I entertain a motion for the facade grant on 19 Main Street. And it could be for discussion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion or questions for Ross on this particular one? It's a smaller grant,
Yeah.
but it is appropriate, and
Yeah, and we do still have to get 3 estimates from businesses, and we'll pick the right one for that.
any questions from council on this particular one? Seeing none.
This has been around a while.
Yeah, this one actually has been talked, and the business is pretty established there, and it actually is a nice looking storefront. And hopefully it comes in place just in time for Main Street to be all prettied and new sidewalks and everything. It should
Right.
add to the decor, right? Have a first and a second. All those in favor? All right, that was an easy one.
Order passed, 7-0.
The next one is for the 671, the former Good Times Lanes. Could I have a motion for discussion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay,
I just have one question.
you shoot.
If we make a waiver or do a waiver, I assume you've looked into it. We don't violate any statute.
We don't violate any statute, and it's actually not a HUD or Main State rule. It's actually in our grant application
And
guidelines.
if I remember correctly, we copied Belfast or somebody when we
We've
did
copied
that.
some other communities to do this, yeah, and it's straightforward. It's just up to us to do this waiver, and I wouldn't ask for a waiver if we hadn't already been this far into the project. I'd have stopped this in the beginning, but we're into the project, and I hate to stop it at this point because there was an oversight earlier.
Okay. How much funds is left after we do this?
After all 3 of these, I think we have about 5,000 or 6,000, but until we finalize the numbers, we won't know. But we've got a small amount left that we could reinvest in somewhere.
Any other questions, council? I know sitting on the committee when it first was established, one of the things is if you look down 196, there's a lot of residential, and the commercial is actually a small percentage, and we were pretty concerned that we wanted to make sure the facades was actually able to go to some of the businesses to actually update the storefronts. To me, seeing this was a commercial building forever and it needs to be revamped, anything we can do as a council and as a community to actually support that, to me, is beneficial. So if we need to make a variant, that'd be fine. The question I would have is is it doable to do this all in one motion as far as to actually have that and then do the variant all in one vote?
Right, we can do that. So what we would do is move to approve the CDBG facade grant request for 671 Lisbon Street with an allowance for a change in the commercial space from 50 to 25%. It actually still stays within the spirit of the law because it's the full front of that first floor, what'll be the first floor. So it'll take up the full front, which is what the statute actually intends. It intends for that to look like full business. It'll just have the residential part behind it.
So
With the
seems like-
motion that was brought forward, is that actually suitable for what we're going to do for a vote, or do we actually have to amend?
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend we withdraw the motion and start all over again.
Right.
If both the second and whoever, was it me?
You
So the
made
council has a vote to withdraw, right?
Okay. So you made the motion and you're voting, you would like to withdraw it, and
No, I think it was Ray.
Councilor Robichaud will agree? Okay.
And I would make the motion as you just read it, which I can't repeat.
Okay, so it would be to approve the CDBG facade grant request for 671 Lisbon Street with a one-time allowance for the property to reduce the required commercial space from 50 to 25% of the main level.
That was the motion.
Your motion as read?
Yes.
Okay, and a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Discussion?
What's that?
Is there any discussion at this point?
Absolutely, anytime.
I just have a question about, just so I'm clear.
Yep.
So Good Time Lanes is now going to be a two-story building. Is that second story going to duplicate the first floor footprint?
The,
Second story is designed to be all apartments, and the first story is going to be storefront in the very front and apartments in the back. I do have a rough blueprint if you'd like to look at what.
are you looking at dimensions, Council Moore?
Yeah,
as
I mean,
far
is
as
it going to duplicate the first floor?
Yeah.
It's not changing in general style.
Yeah.
They're adding a second floor.
And anything done,
Still has to come before the
yeah,
planning board.
it's still,
Come to the planning board, this is very rough.
and anything that's built on 196 at this point has to meet on 196 standards, which means it actually has to comply and look aesthetically correct to the guidelines.
How many apartments are?
I think it's a total of 9, 4 on the first floor, 5 on the second.
Okay.
Any other questions, Council, at all? Take our time, we don't have to rush through this, so. Everybody all good? All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thank you. So we have another easy one after, I think, right? So we'll look at the one for 231 Lisbon, which is going to be the new location for All Clean, which, as we know, has been multiple different things. It's been the old post office and you know, glass pipes for sale building. I think that's how we used to refer it to for a lot of times. But we have a new owner that's looking actually to make some improvements to that, and entertain a motion for discussion.
I make the motion.
I'll second that.
Any questions from council to Ross on this particular application?
I'm particularly happy that the windows got boarded up and painted in the meantime.
Painted, temporarily. He did do the roof already,
Yeah,
which was nice.
got rid of leaks, I think.
Now,
Oh, go ahead.
no,
Where is the parking for that establishment?
I believe it's right in front of that building. I'd have to check on the property layout, but I think it's right there in the front of the building.
Because doesn't the town own, like, right next to
No,
that as well?
most of the parking that's paved there goes along with that structure, I do believe. Even though back where there was a tractor-trailer truck body for quite some times, and then all around the front of it, I think it actually has road frontage on 196 and Village Street.
It does, it turns the corner.
There was one piece of that property that was in question for a while.
Yep.
When the building was torn down, but it's no longer in question.
Ross, do you know if the renovations that they're going to be done, does that need to go through and meet the 196 standards also? I'm not sure if that's gone to the planning board yet or not.
I don't think it has come to the planning board yet, but
Yeah.
I expect it will.
Okay, yeah.
I'll double check that.
And pretty much anything, I think, has been discussed with the Lisbon Development Committee, anything that gets a facade grant is with the understanding that it meets all the requirements of the planning board and the 196 master plan. Entertain a vote on this. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Looks like you're still up.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is Order 2022-132, confirming the process for the use of Finance Authority of Maine, FAME, funds.
Thank you. So what we discovered pretty quickly after looking into some of the accounts, I've had a couple requests from a couple businesses, specifically those suffering on Main Street, for some funding. And when we started looking into the grant dollars, revolving loan dollars that were available in the town, everything required a matching fund, or it required a bank denial and that kind of thing. And when I came across the FAME funding, which was originally done in 1996, and I discovered that that was originally intended to be exactly what we're looking for, which was no matching funds, no bank denial. It was a working capital loan to help small businesses succeed. And we somehow, in the years since then, in combining our ordinances, rolled them all into one revolving loan fund ordinance, and that ordinance requires that match and requires that bank denial. So what we've done is we spoke to the lawyer, and I've worked with the finance director to come up with a plan to allow you to do an order that modifies our revolving loan process to take that FAME money back out of the big bucket and put it in its own bucket so that we can use it to help the small businesses who aren't looking for a large development but are simply looking for some capital money to just do some working capital and that kind of thing. Currently I have this number here. I also have a finance director behind me who can answer serious questions. We have about $1 million in our revolving loan fund. $205,000 of that is in a commercial loan fund. The IRP has $664,000 in it, and the FAME account, which we speak of tonight, is $125,000. That started as $71,000, but has been turned over and matured into a balance of $125,000. All of those monies are in one account, but they are subdivided and categorized differently, so we know where they are and how that works. So they're all earning interest on that one account, but they're subdivided. So that's where we stand today, and I'm asking to sort of take that 125 out of the ordinance coverage of the big picture and be able to use it to help support some of the small businesses who are just looking for working capital.
Entertain a motion for discussion.
I'd make the motion. I thought we had.
And a second.
I'll second that.
Questions from council? I get a few.
Yeah, how do we do that? It's a modification of an ordinance, right?
Yeah, I think we need to have a first and second reading in ordinance, wouldn't we?
Sounds like it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that was some of the discussions we would have. I guess
That's a lot.
if we could actually tonight at least actually have some discussion and see if there's actually some type of feeling from council that that's the direction they want to go. I think it's probably good to at least get it at that level instead of actually having spin out wheels and have it not be approved at the end. I'm glad to see that we have the money we do. Having $1 million of money that we actually can use to actually help support our businesses in town is huge. As we all know right now, that money is there to be used, and sitting there, it doesn't do us any good because the interest we're making on that money right now is far from adequate. It's probably pretty much nothing in a sense. So the administration fees probably overcost the interest we're making at times. The FAME account, I mean, I just want to be really clear. I mean, I'm definitely all for this because I think the idea of the FAME, which as a business owner I've looked at many times, gone through the process, has its benefits. I would just want to make sure that we're using the word FAME-like, but not FAME. This would still be a town-directed and run. It would not actually have the state guidelines that followed it, which we actually do with a revolving loan fund now. I mean, in the past, and Lisbon has actually done its due diligence. We've actually taken a fairly large amount of money, but we've actually used it over the years and allowed businesses to borrow it and pay us back at a reasonable interest rate. And we've actually now have a pretty substantial amount of money in a bank to help businesses prosper. And we haven't been really using it, and it's not to our it's not that we're not trying, it's just the idea in the good economic times, people actually have a good opportunity to go to the bank and borrow money, and sometimes even at a lower interest rate than we were charging. But with that being said, I think if we are trying to give some working capital to people that need it, the idea of actually having let's just say $125,000 broken off of that, put that into account and actually make it a very reasonable interest rate with a very reasonable terms, but still going through all our same guidelines that we have, which mean it would have to go through our loan committee. It would have to be guaranteed money, you know.
All of that's in the packet,
Yep.
the outline for it. Yep.
So it's not a risk. It's just more or less allowing people to actually be able to get a little bit less interest rate. Because right now, especially if we have businesses that are going through trying times, the last thing we want to do is trying to be making a lot of money interest on them. But like I say, even 2% would be usually better than what we're making right now with the money sitting in that account. So
I think that we're putting some extraordinary pressure on the businesses that are downtown right now because of the way that's going, and we can't help it.
Yeah.
So anything that we could do to help it legitimately would be beneficial.
Just to clarify, we did speak to legal about this, and he did indicate that this could be done as an order.
it could be done as an order.
Yes.
Oh, really?
And I would encourage that because I think these businesses don't want to wait through
I was going to say, because
another
this has
session,
taken
another
6 weeks
reading.
to do
It'll
this.
take
So-
us, yeah.
Right, so the process, if we had to do a first and second reading, would take, it would take us into August. If we do it as an order, which legal has told us that we can do, then you can approve it now, and we can go ahead and change the ordinance.
Modify it?
We can, I'll have to look into that, actually. I'll
I
have
think
to
our
look into
plan
that
was
more.
to go forward with an ordinance modification, but this would get us the ability
Right.
to start issuing loans
Okay.
tomorrow.
If we want
based
to,
on a decision this evening.
right, if we want to change the ordinance permanently so that it falls within these parameters, which should probably be done.
So what we're doing is essentially waiving a provision of the ordinance.
That's correct.
And, I feel a little bit about the idea of, if this money, I'm glad it was earmarked differently in the account so we know which money came from different programs, because we did a few years back actually consolidate a lot of different monies into one account and different programs, just because the town actually had paid all its debts and we were able to handle that money in a different way within our community. So if that $125,000 that was originally designed for this type of purpose is still available and earmarked for that in a sense, we're really only not, we're modifying it, but we're going back to what the original intent was, not actually changing it to something unique,
Right.
I would think that the way to do it would be, like you said, with an order, but follow it up with a change in the ordinance so that we could use it in the future.
And Ross, the so $125,000. Do you actually have a plan on what I'm not sure what the original cap was on the FAME loans. Do we actually have a process in place or an idea?
Even though they only gave us 71,000, they went up to 150,000 on their cap, which didn't make sense, but I understand that.
Yeah.
We have put a cap at this on 50, and certainly, we would encourage somebody to only ask for what they need, not just go for 50 every time. But I think I've heard some rumblings that there are folks who are looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 right now just to make it through the summer. So that's where we set the cap. But if you feel like it needs to be less to make it dispersible, to be honest, nobody's come to our office for money in quite some time. So
How much money is in there again?
this one's 125.
Okay, so we don't make too many 50s.
Not too many 50s, about 1.5. Yep.
But I guess with that being said, if we do truly have $1 million actually for business use, we may also want to look at when we do the revision, that we actually make that pot potentially bigger if we need to, and not saying we have to transfer the money all at one time, but we're just starting the summer. So one thing I didn't want to do with this process is limit the idea of just having people run to the door, and the first one there actually is the one that survived, and the other ones don't. So, I guess at this point in time, even if we could actually, potentially make the amounts a little bit lower so we can go further for the beginning, and then possibly have a two-step process. But again, I'll leave that up to you, and we'll go through this initial part that we need to do to make those funds available.
Okay.
Any other questions from council at all on this? It is money we have, and it is money that was actually there for this particular
We have to
reason.
do something again.
Yeah.
My only question is the notion that legal said it was okay.
That came from a Maine Municipal Association.
Okay, not our town attorney.
No.
No, we reached out to them because they have more experience with all of these different loan programs.
Thank you.
So if I may clarify the motion, I want to make sure that Councillor Fellows and Councillor Lunt are okay with the wording.
Understand what we said?
Okay. So I have here that we have a motion to authorize the loan parameters and loan application and approval process as presented for the use of the FAME Regional Economic Development Revolving Loan Program funds as originally intended by the Finance Authority of Maine.
Should we actually have FAME stated in there? It just seems like it's a false presence to the program that we're not really following.
Use the word prior or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm okay with it. I just don't want, I just
Or
don't
the
want to be
original.
restricted if we need
I
to,
can
that's
say.
all. Because there is a lot more restrictions when you go
Okay.
through FAME. That is a
Thank you.
process that would take some time.
I'm still obligated to annually report to FAME because they had that initial investment and interest of this. So each year they ask me, are there any new loans? And based on what I'm looking at, the last loan is 2007 out of the FAME, and that has been revolved twice already. So based on the spirit of FAME, and maybe we name it as that, the spirit of FAME, it has already achieved its mission as far as FAME's concerned. But I'm still obligated to report to FAME what our balance is and what loans we've dispersed.
So you're all set to how we're doing it as long as we actually have it presented that way, that FAME's actually somehow it's how it's done. I mean, that's as long as we're not restricting to the idea of us following the guidelines that we had before. That's the biggest thing.
We've got our own guidelines, and that's what we spelled
So
out.
it's
for you.
only our town ordinances gets in the way.
Right.
Yeah. That's fine. I just curious. That's all. We mentioned it in there, you know, written out in the order. So just wanted to make sure. Is council all set with that? Any other questions?
Does it sound reasonable? Yes.
And if I remember correctly, the Maine municipal lawyers are basically the same people who put together that follow up and approve the FAME loans and begin with, right? So we are going back to the people that originally set this up to actually make sure we're doing the right thing. Any other questions? I think we kind of went through that enough. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item, Order 2022-133, the Planning Board request for planning services.
Didn't think we'd let you go that easy, did you?
No. Hello again, Bill Cool for Planning Board. We are asking the town council to authorize us access to funds to hire a town planner and town planner for hire, I guess, who would help Planning Board on the more complicated issues and help us with research on those issues to make the issues that are coming before us that are not just your normal, we're moving our business to our house or something simple, that will help us to expedite and make more fair the process of what we're doing. We recently had, as council is aware, an issue with the Rural Open Space 2 brought on by a request from the Casares family that spiraled into a multi-month torture session, basically, for us and the Casareses, and partly because of changing our court code enforcement officer, but Planning Board also not having the knowledge to know what we didn't know. So hopefully with the adding of a planner on an as-needs basis, because we don't always have work for a planner to do, to bring him or her in a capacity to give us guidance, to tell us what other towns are doing, and to help us just make the business of the planning board more efficient. When I was new on planning board and Councilor Fellows was our chair at the time, we had several planners actually, who helped us draft the new marijuana ordinances by looking at other towns and what they were doing and using that wording on how we put together our ordinances. In my opinion, it made the process much less painful and much more efficient, instead of having to reinvent the wheel from a bunch of amateurs who work elsewhere during the day. I just don't have the time to do the research sometimes for these things, and hopefully a planner would be able to give us that kind of expertise.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
is it possible that I make a motion for this?
Absolutely. I was going to ask for that.
I'd like to make a motion to develop an RFP to contract with a firm to help us plan for the future.
Need a second for discussion?
No second.
Okay. Would you add to that, Councilor Fellows? Do you want to broaden on that?
Well,
Plan for the future.
I didn't know what else to say except that what we're trying to do is clean up some things and develop some better programs for our town, potentially. There are a lot of little things that need to be done. There's some potential larger considerations as well.
So one of the things that became evident to us, and I'm not judging the future of farming in Lisbon or anything like that, that's not my place to do, is that when the last comprehensive plan was drafted, Lisbon is not that town right now. The housing boom of the last year has shown that to be something that maybe needs to be adjusted. And before we start tearing apart the comprehensive plan, which is a big monster of a project, we need more muscle that has experience doing this with other towns and municipalities.
One of the things that comes to mind when I think about this stuff, and I got thinking about it, was if we're developing an RFP, what are we going to say? Are we going to tell them we want to do this, that project, several projects, what? So I wanted to we've been talking over the several months about smart growth.
Yep.
And smart planning. Well, there's a whole EPA thing on smart growth and all kinds of possibilities you can do with it. But if you go in the order of looking for something to develop the town as smart growth, you can pick different ways to go and come up with an RFP that makes some sense. I agree with you that the planning board does not need a permanent planner all the time. It does need help, and help in the past hasn't been available or not in sufficient quantity to really help. So I envision somebody who would, on occasion, meet with the planning board, on occasion do some work that they present to the planning board, that type of thing.
I would also add, I think it should be up to the planning board when they need help,
Yes.
rather than something that's like a big structured thing. We're not asking for a program that we need to do a one-time thing, but rather the planning board, whenever they have big issues that come up like that, they're going to need to have somebody on call that can say, we need some hours from you. I think that's what we need, is a flexibility in that kind of program.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just your run-of-the-mill normal stuff that we can handle within the expertise within the room. Sometimes it's not, and it's times like that create problems for the people coming before us with requests that I'm hoping having outside expertise can make our process more efficient and more fair to the people who are coming before us.
We have another agenda item coming up later, which is a patch for ROS2. And I think my feeling has always been we don't want to just keep patching things.
Right.
Really shouldn't be.
So is the original question here a request to contract with North Star Planning
North Star Planning is
for
whom we had dealt
professional
with in the past.
services? What's that?
North Star Planning was whom we had dealt with 2 years ago. I believe.
That's the recommendation, right?
That was
On
a
an
letter
hourly
that was,
basis, not to exceed 15,000.
that was a letter that was brought forward to us. If I may add, so a couple things is just kind of keep it kind of simple. As a council, we actually had a discussion through our budget process, and I believe we earmarked 15,000. I think that's a dollar that came up. So I mean, I think that's where the 15,000 is coming from.
That was where I was going with this, because I thought this was addressed in the budget.
It was.
Alright.
So I don't think the question is really the idea of looking for money. It's more the process and how we go about it. I'd like just to add at this point in time I think it's needed. So I have no questions about that, because again, I appreciate everything you folks do, because it's I'd like to say it's volunteer. It's not strictly a volunteer, but in a sense it is, because you put a lot more time in than you actually reimburse for, without a doubt. And there are some complicated stuff coming up, and it gets more complicated as you dive into it, right? So the last planning session we had was a little bit, how would I say, not directed in maybe the correct manner, because there was really there wasn't one person directing that planner on what needed to be done,
Right.
and the time that they spent, and what the priorities were. I would just like to add something tonight, that one of the things that Lisbon does have now is we have an assistant manager, which is in the room, and he's very capable of actually doing a lot of things and bringing a lot of things forward to our community. And I know he actually has been earmarked with the idea of actually following along somewhat with the planning board to make sure everything's up on task. And with that being said, if what I see happening is we actually go out to bid, and we actually put together have yourself sit down with the assistant town manager and the manager and come up with an idea, what we're looking for, and keep it within the strengths of money that we budgeted, and go out to bid for an hourly fee of what we would look for. So we would actually put it out to as many firms possible, because that's kind of what our policy says we need to do if it's over $10,000.
I believe North Star was just their counselor, because we had dealt with them before.
Exactly. It was
Track record with
it was a known, right?
Well, the other point being that if it's over $10,000, we still have to go out there in the formal process.
Exactly. And then at that point in time, as I think we actually do have good resources in town that we didn't have before, to actually have this planner be dedicated to certain projects, and to be able to know the beginning and the end and the middle, and know that the planning board. So I guess the planning board's always been kind of left out there by itself, and I mean, there's really been no one in the town that's really been responsible for overseeing it, besides the idea of our previous code enforcer that left a while back. So at this point in time, to have more personnel in the town to allow them to actually work with the planning board and facilitate this planner, I'm all for it. I just think that because of our guidelines, we're going to have to put together a bid process to send it out and see what we have for opportunities, and from there kind of figure a plan on how we use it. So does that seem fair?
That seems perfectly fine to me.
And I think that the process can work really well. It didn't work well when actually the planner was reporting to the planning board, which is a bunch of volunteers.
Yeah.
So that really didn't work out so well.
Yeah, no, I think it wasn't actually, we needed it, we just didn't have the staff to actually monitor it to make sure it was being done efficiently. No fault to anybody, it was just, we just didn't have the staff, you know what I mean? That's the problem that we're trying to overcome, so.
Right, and planning board is fluid with we have another set of, I think my term's up in July, or at least this term is up in July. And people show up when they show up, so it's volunteers. It's only the person power we have in the room at that time. And having more folks with a technical background would be of great service to us.
Did you just volunteer to rerun for chair?
I did not.
No, I think I heard that, so it's just making sure.
You have to talk to my wife
I
first.
think
She
he's
gets
in
power
line
of
for
veto.
something else.
Any other questions of the planning board chair or of staff? I mean, it is one of those things that's been a trying concern for a while, so, I mean, anything we can do to try to address it.
And planning board has discussed that we would like to, we hadn't hired one yet, but work with economic development and the town manager, the assistant town manager, as a better way, a way that somehow planning board can streamline what it does and our interaction with codes as well. So perhaps we can take some of these bumps out of the road that have erupted just organically over time.
Well, when you have lacking holes in the staff, I mean, it makes it very trying for people to get everything done, so hoping we fix that.
Glenn, welcome to day 2. What do you think about it?
I was actually in Maplewood when they kicked off their master plan, so I was part of those discussions early on. So hopefully I can add some insight and value when you get to that
Okay.
discussion. So.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so we have a first and a second. If we're ready to vote, everybody, sir?
Could you reread the motion again?
I have-
So I can try to understand exactly.
I have a
what
motion
you
to develop an RFP to help plan for the future, not to exceed $15,000 that's been budgeted.
Are you all set with Harry? Do you want to go back to the original order, so where it said planning board request for planning services? Does that seem more
Yeah, I
broad to you?
think that's a little more, I mean, I don't know how to.
Can I just have some clarification? So RFP, we're going to, the planning board's going to work with the assistant town manager and myself to work on an RFP. Okay.
I just don't know how you write an RFP for the future of the town.
Well, specifically for planning services is really
Yeah.
what they're writing an RFP for, to support the planning board.
It's more apt as it was written in the order,
Yeah.
the idea of
Right.
planning board request for planning services.
Yeah, I'd say develop an RFP for planning board.
Well, there's already a motion
services.
on the table, so
Okay.
that's either got to be withdrawn or we have to vote on it.
I can clarify with Mr. Fellows, because he made the motion. When you say to help plan for the future, do you mean for planning services?
I do, yes.
Perfect.
That's what I meant.
All righty then. Are we all set with that motion? Lisa just made it work. All those in favor?
Order passes 7-0.
Thank you, Bill. Hopefully things get smoother and things work out. Appreciate you coming in. Next item, please.
Order 2022-134, Ferry Road improvements, bid results and recommendation.
Good evening, everyone. Randy Sear, Public Works Director, Solid Waste Director. I'm going to have Mandy Oliver from Oliver Associates come up, and she can answer any questions. We already have, I'm sure you've seen the bid results, so we recommend that we award the paving to the project to Northeast Paving. I'd like to have Mandy come on up.
Good evening, Mandy Oliver from Oliver Associates, Town Engineer. So you do have in your packet the results of our bid. We put out to bid for the Ferry Road Improvements Project, and for those not familiar with the scope, basically we're starting at Gross Development, Marshall Road, and going down around, what did you call the corner?
Brooks Corner.
Brooks Corner, okay, a little bit to the, there's a double culvert near the end there with a crossing right near the river, and that's kind of the end of the scope of the work. And the work consists of replacing all the culverts along that stretch, milling the road, and repaving. The budget that we had originally that we'd estimated last year, evidently I was more pessimistic than the contractor, which sometimes is good, was $2.2 million. The total bid is actually $1,567,025. Northeast Paving, who does a lot of work for the state, a lot of road work, was the low bidder. So we do recommend that we will award the town, enter a contract with them
And I
for
think
that.
a motion for discussion.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Questions from council?
You said milling the road?
It's a full depth reclaim was the
Okay.
proper term, sorry. Yeah.
Few questions. Actually a few, so it'll be a few minutes. Randy, did you actually make arrangements that we would actually recapture the milling material like we did last time?
No, because this will actually be used as a base for.
It's going back down on the road
Yes,
then?
that's
Yes,
correct.
it's going to be actually ground into the surface of the gravel to enhance the gravel. Unlike the Pine Woods Road where we took up all the poor gravel and soil that was there. In this case, because it's such a long road and the cost is so much, we're not removing the gravel, we're just milling that into it to enhance it and then paving over it. So there won't be any millings.
Yep, and your amount was pretty close, because one of the bids was, within a small percentage of what your quote was. So
True.
I think we
Yep.
just got lucky. How's that? It's amazing every time, coming from the business side of the world, when I look at these bids, it just baffles me of how they get there. You know what I mean? And, some numbers don't even make sense, right? So striping the road, okay, we have companies charging us $1,000 to restripe the road, and the one to win the bid's going to do it for $50, which in the back of my mind, I'm thinking there's just no way that you can paint that road stripes for $50. So and again, that's through the whole bid process. It's some numbers just way out in left field, and I don't know if they just come up with a dollar number at the bottom, then they just add in numbers to make that add up.
Some
I
people
don't really know, but
some
either
people
way,
don't really
it's,
want it, so they bid too
Yeah.
high.
it is. Couple questions. So we actually have a bid and we have an alternative. So the alternative is the idea of cutting the trees, and finishing the lawns and driveways, or what is the alternative?
No, actually, I was nervous because bidding has been so crazy, and we've had a lot of high bids that were exceeded budgets. So I cut the last section of off and made that, which included the replacement of some additional guardrail and 2 big culverts at the very end around the corner, because I was afraid we were going to be over budget. So it's all the same work. It's just there was like 600 feet, I think, at the end that I had that was a little tougher that I thought might cost more, but it turned out we had enough money to do everything.
It just seems strange, because when you look at the bid, you look at like the traffic control. I mean, as then varies from one company by over $10,000 just in the alternative bid for just traffic control. So again, it's one of those things, when you look through it, it really makes your head spin trying to figure out where they come up with these numbers and where they don't. You know what I mean? So,
It does.
so the alternative bid is actually getting us where we need to be.
Yes.
And it's been brought to the attention that, so we went out to bond, and we already have that money secured, right? And we can't reduce the amount of that bond. It's actually what we got. Is there a potential, since we seem to be getting a somewhat a reasonable rate at this, is it practical that we actually extend the milling and actually do more paving on that road to get the most bang for a buck?
Well, that was, Mandy and I were discussing that, and that's basically what we'd like to do with the rest of the money. We don't have to go as far as reclaiming it, but we could shim and overlay. And that would probably bring us almost to the Pinewood Road section, by the time that's all said and done with the extra money.
And there's nothing saying that we can't do this, right? Because as long as the money is used in this particular zone, right? I think that's been used in multiple contracts we had, right? As long as it's within a certain,
Right. I think that
area.
that last time when we did this with the Pine Road Road, when we had a similar thing, the decision was that the money had to be used on that road. So Ferry Road has a lot more road that we're not touching as part of this, so I think it could all be utilized there.
Isn't there another alternative in that you can also use the money to pay the loan back? Or the bond back?
Kayla?
So the only other option that we got legal advice on in relation to Pinewood Road, because Pinewood Road we had 300,000 left, and when we go out to bond, and if the bid comes in less, I'm already obligated to that bond, and we have to pay that back over 15 years. So legal advice for Pinewood when we had 300,000 left was we have 3 fiscal years worth of interest that we can pay, interest only, for repayment of the bond. And that's what we're doing for Pinewood, which has less than what the Ferry Road would have because we went out for bond for 2.8 million, which I already have as of today in the bank. So if the bid is 1.5,
It's 1.6, but there's also, in that original 2.8, there was contingency and engineering, the cost for the inspection and for our design work, so.
yeah, so we could, under the same confines, use for 3 fiscal years of interest, or we could.
Well, I mean, I thought if there is definitely more work to do there, I mean, Ferry Road's not in great condition beyond the limits of this work, and I think originally when Randy and I drove it, we kind of said, okay, we got to stop here because it's going to be too crazy expensive. If we can go further with that money and then use the rest, whatever's left, for that kind of reason.
No, it is alternative, and that's what we're here. We're having a discussion about what we can use the money for. So we always look back at the idea of paving is not going to get any cheaper. So anything that we can do today, even though we're paying back interest on the loan, when we go to pave that later on, it's actually going to be at a higher rate, which would chew up anything that we would have saved in interest over that period of time. That's my feeling, anyways, because we actually added these bonds at are a pretty good rate as far as interest-wise. I mean, I'm not sure what we've got on this one, but it's better than some of the rates that we've had in years past. So.
We could put our heads together and try to do the best of both worlds. I mean, take the paving further and then look at what you might need for that payment, if that's something the town, and bring it back to you to make a decision, or
does that make a
work it
decision
out with
on
staff.
us? Actually, it doesn't really make a decision on us awarding the bid, but the only thing would that be a secondary bidding process for them doing the rest of it? I mean, the only reason does it have to be used by the same contractor, because we already have a paving company that we actually got a pretty reasonable rate on, and we may not even be using all of what we actually approved, right? Because the amount we didn't have enough funds to actually meet the criteria of it. So, I mean, can we make this work both ways, or does it? I mean, is there some type of correlation that we can make that work?
There's no obligation to use the same contractor. We should just look at whoever gave the better pricing and get your bang for your buck.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll have to leave that up. I mean,
We'll
I
work
guess
that out.
You guys.
Yeah.
I do have to make a note, though, Northeast, in this contract has a no escalation or no escalator, so it's locked in at that price. The escalator is that, as the price of liquid goes up, so does the price per ton. And so that's another thing to look at, because we're locked in at a certain rate, but whether or not it's at the same rate to do the extra paving is another thing,
With how many extra tons was it that we actually was originally out to bid for Spencer that we weren't going to use? It was actually a fair amount of tonnage that was over and beyond.
Yeah, it's I think it's around 4,000 tons, somewhere in there.
Yeah. But that would only do a small section of that particular, because that's a price that we're locked in at. But.
Right. We locked in at like $84 per ton. Right now with the escalation, we're up to $88.90.
Through Spencer, you mean?
Through Spencer, yeah.
Any idea what it is through Northeast?
This one is $89.50 for the work that's in here, so they're pretty much the same.
Pretty compatible.
Although,
Okay.
as Randy pointed out, we would have to, out of respect for the contractor who's not, didn't bid on this other work, have to make sure that price would hold for additional work.
I guess with everything being said, we're still in a better place than we thought we were going to be. So if we can get more work done and actually still pay back some of the interest.
There you go.
So tonight's vote is basically the idea to award the bid of the amount that actually came up for the initial contract. And when do we have to actually make a decision on how we spend the rest of the bond money? Is that
Not even, I wouldn't even think it'd have to be in this season if you didn't want to, but I mean, like he's already said, prices aren't going down, so.
No, not at
I mean, they
all.
do sometimes, but they don't seem to be at the moment, so,
Yep.
more we can get done, the better.
I would just maybe want to take advantage if we actually did have, X amount of tonnage that was actually guaranteed at a particular price that is adjusting. I mean, it's probably still going to be a better rate than we'll get next year. And I'm not sure how the two projects could actually work together or not. I mean, we wouldn't want to pave new pavement and have them beat it all up with equipment going over it all day long. But, I mean, I guess that's stuff for you folks to work out, right?
Okay, we'll do some math and report back.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have a first and a second for the bid process for Northeast for doing the Ferry Road project.
Is there I have a question.
Absolutely.
Is there anything special that needs to be done at Brooks's Corner, because that's a pretty bad flood area?
Well, the project's not a rebuild. We're really just, rehabbing the existing road. We aren't changing any alignment or changing anything because of the nature of the reclaiming. It'll end up being several inches higher than it is right now because there'll actually be more material there. And we're putting up additional signage, but nothing to do with flooding. And we did check all the culvert sizes and made sure that everything was proper from that perspective.
Look, it's all right for flooding, you think?
Yep.
Any other questions for council? It is a big project. I mean, we actually are spending a lot of money. You know, some people mention we don't spend a lot of money on that side of town, but between Pinewoods Road and Ferry Road and some of the stuff we're doing up in the intersection, there's a lot of money that we're spending up there to make sure everything looks good and doing the best we can. So, with that being said, all those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Is there a projected time frame on that?
What I'm understanding is they may start at the end of July, beginning of August. We'll set up a contract signing in the next couple of weeks and do a pre-construction meeting and make sure we share that information. We have something more definite.
And in the contract, there's actually a set time frame from once they start to completion, or?
There is, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what it is. I think it's 150 days total, 120 to substantial completion. So the intention is to get it all done this year.
No utilities out that way anyway, so I mean, it's basically just dealing with
Yeah,
culverts.
there's water at the very beginning, but I did contact the water department just to make sure that they weren't going to be doing anything, because I'd heard that there was a possibility they were, but they are not. So, but pretty much after you get a few 100 feet down the road from the beginning of the project, you're right, just culverts, which we are replacing.
Randy, maybe you're familiar, so it sounds like some expansion on the gross development out that way.
Yep.
Do you know if that is actually going to need to tap into any of that water line that we're looking towards the end, or is it actually existing
I don't
water?
believe so, because where that actually goes across, they'd have to go across the brook, and I don't think they're gonna go that route to get there.
So they're going to use the existing water
They'll use
utilities.
the existing water inside the development, gross development.
Yeah. I'm glad you reached out, because that's something we haven't really been really good with in the past, the idea of actually just making sure all our utilities get updated all at the same time. Thank you.
Always trying to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next item, please.
Next item is Order 2022-135 to amend Chapter 70, Sections 361 and 536, Dimensional Requirements, and Section 70-362-2, Performance or Land Use Standards. This is a first reading.
Do we have anyone here to explain that?
Bill, would you like to just touch base on that, or you can just do a quick overview, don't have to get into details, but.
Yeah, I don't have my notes on this matter here with me at all, but it's part of the ROS2 thing I mentioned earlier. We're changing the dimensional standards for this particular instance to make it work temporarily while we address the larger issue.
Mr. Chair, that's the patch.
There's the patch.
It's the patch. It's more of a Band-Aid than a patch. But
Maintain a motion for discussion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any questions from Bill?
We have to send it to hearing, so my question was, I just want to make sure that we get maybe beyond the requirements for notification out there, so that we don't have any surprised residents coming to us and saying, you never told me, I didn't hear, whatever, even though we may not legally have to do that.
So you're actually saying this is the first reading, so prior to our second reading, that actually we have some verification that everybody's aware of it that lives in those areas?
Yeah, I think we have to send notifications, or if we haven't already.
we do.
Yep. So basically, there's a certain area on Route 9 that has kind of a different set of rules that makes it very challenging to actually have large parcels of property to do any extended.
And it inhibits the owner's ability to develop it in a fashion that works.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
The reason I mention that is because Route 9, Upland Road is also part of that. And there has been, in the past, there's been misgivings about what's done over there. So I just wanted to make sure that they're included.
Do you actually feel that the patch actually has the proper protections in there for, how would I say it, fulfilling the requirements on the back lots and how that's going to work? I mean, does this fall into a different category now that the planning board can use to determine what can be used for back lots, which ones they can't? So
I think so.
Okay.
Nothing's perfect, and I don't have the kind of foresight to tell you for sure.
My understanding is that the pre-existing, like, dimensional limits are very difficult to work with because of the way it requires that you can't have narrow, long lots. You have to have very wide lots and
frontage,
a lot of frontage, and it makes it very difficult for people to, like, okay, if you have two brothers inherit the property, and like in this case, you want to split it, and you can't do anything like that as it is now because it's so restrictive.
What we wanted to make sure, in a broad sense, is that people can develop their land to use it for their own, for the purposes of family land, to be used to develop, have people live on their space, but at the same time not chop it up into such weird dimensions that it was basically unplanned growth.
So I guess the question would be is you actually have a big parcel on Route 9 that could not have been a mill street where you actually had a big field and you put a road up the middle and put houses on either side, right? You actually put a development. Do the same guidelines that go with, like, when you take this away from this particular zoning and actually take away some of the restrictions, is what guidelines fall in place? I mean, is the same guidelines as subdivisions fall in place? Because before you never could do a subdivision there, right, because of the zoning.
Right.
So now, could you do a subdivision if it falls under a certain guidelines, or?
I think you can under the new, because the new one is just making an amendment just to allow that, limited use of you can divide it up a little bit more reasonably. But that's why we need to have a larger discussion with like a planner to look at, do we want to have this zone at all, or do we want to turn it back to regular rural open space like it was before? I think that's a larger discussion that needs more feedback from the community.
So the way this is, again, I'm reading through it and it was just a little confusing, and I haven't been in all the discussions, so I apologize. So if, say you needed 300 feet of frontage to build a house, okay, so now you got 500 feet of frontage. So that means if you split it in half, neither side can build a house, right? So this really mean that you can actually now just build two houses, or in that 25 to 50 acres you could build multiple houses? That's a question I have. I mean, what restrictions, when we take the frontage away?
There's still frontage. It's just shrunken down from, I don't know what it was. It was much larger, but there's still a quite large frontage.
So the idea of a road going back and building houses off that road considered frontage does not apply in this circumstance.
Right,
even if they wanted to do a subdivision, it still could not be applicable in this area because of that.
Right.
So basically, all you're doing is allowing two houses to be built.
Correct.
With a smaller road frontage, and that is actually.
Well, you're also allowed to build a road back.
You can't, right, but you can't build
Which isn't
6
public
houses in the
road.
back or something.
We were trying to, and didn't really succeed. We were trying to make it a simpler process for this particular space.
Yep.
And while we're looking at the whole larger ROS2 issue.
Yeah. Just listen to that discussion that night. I mean, it's just the thing that kind of threw me off was the idea that there is a road that goes down and divides the property, which the road really doesn't play any part in this, because once we narrow the road frontage, we're still talking about Route 9 road frontage.
Yep.
So really, the only thing, what we're gaining is the idea of the ability to build one house. Now they're able to sell two house lots. Really with no gainage going back for a possible subdivision.
Right.
And as long as that's the intention,
That's the intent.
That's one of the things that I was just wondering, because it sounded like they were that.
No, we were keenly aware that we didn't want to be able to peel away the protections for that area altogether. As the way Lisbon is currently envisioned, we want to keep the rural open spaces open. So at the same time, we wanted this family, in particular the Gosarises, to be able to develop their land because of issues that happen within their family in the subdivision of a larger chunk of real estate.
Totally understand. So they're gonna, even if you have a 25-acre piece, you still got to build the house out front by the road, within 100 feet of the road frontage. I mean, there's certain requirements still would have to play in effect. The same thing has happened down the road. Even though you have huge acreage in a road, it would still have to meet the requirements of that zoned area. But it would just, the only thing we're actually not restricting is the frontage needed, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's still more restrictive than rural open space 1, which is most of the rest of the north side of town there.
Right.
So potentially what could happen is those lots could be sold, and then later on, if we actually revisit our planning.
If we decide we don't need rural open spaces anymore, or not rural open space 2, or change that in some form or fashion, any of that could happen down the road. But that's one of the things we're asking for the expertise of a planner to help us look into, the ramifications to that. Part of the question the planning board asked itself is, Lisbon rural, truly? Are we a bedroom community, or are we still doing farming? And it's those larger questions that we need to look at the comprehensive plan with the interaction with council and the folks of Lisbon, of course. And that's one of the things that took us so long. It just spiraled into these weird rabbit holes, and we probably should have avoided.
Do you, and one more question, I didn't bring you here to torture you tonight by all means, but you're doing a great job. In that area, this is one piece of property that we know this would be affected that actually will solve a problem. Now, this encompasses from pretty much Upland Road by, from Upland Road up just beyond the Casarises, right? That actually, that area. Is there other properties that this would affect, or is this basically just the only parcel at this point in time that this would
It's
actually?
intended to be only this parcel at this
On
point.
Route 9?
Okay.
There's also another rural open space 2 section over on the eastern side of town.
They're not adjoining.
They're not adjoining, but they're still governed by the same rules. So.
So, I mean, I took this was all for this zone.
Yes.
So not just this property, but anything in
Zone,
rural
yes,
roads.
yeah,
Yeah, but the Casarises were the only request on our
But anyone else
document.
coming along could take advantage of the change.
Exactly. So anybody, do we know if there's other properties that potentially could come forward that
Not that I'm
meet the
aware of.
requirement? Okay. Just curious, that's all.
No,
Inquiry minds.
not that I'm aware of at this time, unless there's a big developer out there looking for a chunk of land to bang out a bunch of houses on.
All right. Some more discussion will lead forward, but at this point in time, this will resolve a problem the planning board's been dealing with for quite some time.
Yeah, subdivisions are not allowed still.
Where's it?
That hasn't been changed. It only changes the
I know subdivisions aren't allowed, but I can't find it.
right, but that section wasn't changed. I don't know. It may be referring to some other section.
Are you all set, done?
Yeah.
Perfect. Anybody have any other questions at all? With that being said, all those in favor? Thank you, Bill.
Order passed, 7-0.
This is a first reading, right? Actually,
Yes.
we need roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, you are right, and I have that ready right here.
I was just
Told me
going to
that
tell
ahead of time, too, so I
I
should have
know.
known.
All right. Counselor Fellows?
Yes.
Counselor LaRochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Aye.
Counselor Kane?
Yes.
Counselor Robichaud?
Yes.
Counselor Smith?
Yes.
We have 7 yeas, 0 nays. Order passed, 7-0.
Next item, whenever you're ready.
All right. Next item is Order 2022-137, the Fire Department pickup truck bid.
It's going to be 136.
I'm sorry, 136. I was getting ahead. 136, Maine Workforce Development Compact membership.
Good evening, and thank you again for having me up here. I am sort of here in lieu of Lena, who's out on leave right now, and also because this is something I was contacted by the Central Maine Community College workforce development folks just to have a meeting after I got the job, and we sat down and talked about a lot of different workforce development options. And they brought this forward, and this is something that is sponsored by the Harold Alphonse Center for the Advancement of Maine's Workforce. And they are, believe it or not, their biggest struggle is convincing businesses that this is as real as it is. It is as simple as this. They offer up to $1,200 per frontline worker through December to reimburse you for training. And I looked at them, I said, so our town's a business, does it work for us too? They said, absolutely. So I went to our HR director and said to him, this is something we ought to look into, and we spent some time investigating it. And really all we have to do is sign up to join the compact, and we can submit all of our training for up to $1,200 per person this year and get reimbursed for that. And additionally, the first year is no match. The second year they offer a $600 match, but I believe since we'll be spending that money on training anyway, it would be reimbursement for half of your training for the second and third year for anybody that you sign up for this. In addition, the employees receive community college scholarships are available for those to continue to test, and they also have some textbook grants that are available for folks who participate in this as well. So what we're asking tonight is simply permission to sign up for the compact, get our name on their list, and as we go through, I think the plan is to have HR come to you periodically with a series of reimbursements and get those approved.
And that's for all our employees.
Every employee, fire department, police department, the whole bit.
So I'd entertain a motion for discussion.
Make a motion.
Second. Got a couple questions. Anybody else have questions?
No, I'm familiar with it. It's a good program.
Okay, good.
Potentially hundreds of employees, so this could be actually hundreds of thousands of dollars that we
Could very
actually
well
get
be.
for training that could actually offset our professional development type of budget, right?
Correct.
Works well.
And how come we didn't know about this a while back? No, I'm just teasing. No.
I've been here
No.
4 weeks, Bert, 4 weeks.
Sounds good. I mean, it does almost sound like there actually has to be, you know, something at the end of the carrot to actually make this not work the way it should.
But if you know the name Alphon, they're pretty good
Oh, they
at
actually-
putting money into programs and trying to make them better. And this is their aim is to simply grow Maine's workforce. And whether that means you grow them to a point where they move on to a better career somewhere else, that's fine. That's part of the process.
Oh,
Well, I mean, definitely this year, if we can actually offset that and actually lead it towards more professional development, and then next year actually keep our budget the same and add this on, we could actually be doubling our monies for training, right? So,
And just further discussion on that, would that be something that the charter would cause us to have to put that into our undesignated funds like the previous town manager did when we got money received by the town? Or is that something that the town would be able to put into like a professional development line item for the employees so they can be reimbursed back into the departments?
well, I mean, one of the things that I guess it's a discussion we'd have to have. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about as we work to actually better our employment, and we've been talking about some educational benefits, ongoing education, and beyond our professional development. So I see this actually falls right in line with that. So I mean, it would be good.
Education fund.
It'd be good if we actually had it. You know, the way we're setting it up, I mean, there has to be prior approval to do classes. So if we can actually budget correctly and actually know what we're dealing with for funding, then it would actually make it much easier. So, and if it's per employee, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's huge. Just a question: have you actually talked to our school department at all? Because that is, you know, a few hundred employees. So just
Not
curious.
yet. I will share this information with them.
Yeah, I can't imagine that wouldn't be beneficial for any organization that actually has that many employees. But
Yep.
Any other questions? Sounds good to me, unless it's something that we find out later on. But
Yeah.
all those in favor? Thank you, Ross.
Pass
Sounds like a
7-0.
win-win. Next item, please, whenever you're ready.
Now you can. Order 2022-137, the fire department pickup truck bid.
Nate LeClaire, Fire Chief. As you recall, I came to about a month and a half ago to request permission to go out to bid for a pickup truck. We went out to bid, and after a long, aggravating process, we eventually got one bid back. We sent out the proposals to 12 different dealerships, plus posted it on our Facebook page, on our website. I had two who actually contacted me with interest, and at the end only received one bid back. The bid came back from O'Connor up in Augusta for a 2500 crew cab pickup truck for a bid price of $45,383. That includes trading in the current pickup truck to lower the overall price of the vehicle, which is a good thing because it brings me in line with what I was originally thinking for a price per truck to begin with. So that's where we're at right now, and I'm requesting to go ahead and award that bid to O'Connor's.
Entertain a motion for discussion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'll second that.
All right. Any questions from the chief?
What do we have budgeted for that?
Right now, I have $59,000 budgeted for the project. That includes outfitting the vehicle.
Okay. What do you think it would cost to outfit the vehicle over above the price that they bid?
What's helpful is the trade-in value, which is going to help keep that in check. One of the things that I want to do may have to, one of the things I asked for as an option price was to have the vehicle painted prior to arrival, so I didn't have to worry about that when it got here to match what we're currently going through on fleet colors. If I'm going through and looking at radios and emergency lights, because the cost of those could change by the time this truck gets here, I may have to not go that option, but I'm hoping that this will all fall in line. Because right now I'll have $13,000 to outfit the vehicle.
All right.
Any other questions?
Did you get an explanation why we sent bids to 8 different RFPs to 8 different dealers and only got one?
I can't answer for the ones who never replied back to me, so I don't know if they just didn't want to get involved with it. I do know that, for example, Ford's not giving out pricing until the fall on these. GM is sending out, they're doing orderings in segments. So back earlier this year, they were doing the special service, like Tahoes and Suburbans. And then they were just doing the double cabs and single cab trucks, and now they're doing the crew cab trucks. And these orders are being opened up, and they're closing within days. The double cab and standard cab pickup trucks, these orders opened up on the 26th when the pricing became available, and they closed the orders on the 27th of May. So we're hitting a tight line and trying to get this truck ordered as it is.
Any other questions, council? Just a couple. So I went through the bid specs that came through. I mean, this truck looks like it's geared up to be strictly just a pickup.
Yep.
Really no heavy hauling. You don't plan, I see it has a tow package. Do you
Yes.
plan on towing the boat potentially, or
Well,
is that
towing
just?
the boat or towing trailers, if we have to haul trailers, like if we bring in like a public works trailer to haul hose when doing large quantities of hose. But we want to be able to have the ability to haul trailers with it.
Yep. And could you just kind of describe what the duties of the truck will be daily, and the idea of how long of a term that you expect this truck?
I expect this truck to last us 10 years. That's what I'm hoping to get out of this truck. The vehicle is basically an all-purpose utility vehicle for us. It will haul firefighters back and forth from fire scenes and even to classes. It hauls equipment back and forth from fire scenes. When we are doing things like storms and we have power lines down, trees down, this truck will go out and it brings out the barricades, it brings out cones. Sometimes it'll sit with down lines so we can get the bigger trucks back on the road during calls, or get them back inside and leave the smaller pickup truck outside sitting with something during those cold weathers. So it's just a vast variety of things that it does, not to mention during the daytime if they have to go run and do errands, they're using that versus the $800,000 truck.
So this is more going to be utility, so it's not going to be responding to calls like your unit or anything like that?
Not the original intent to respond on initial calls. I mean, it is going to be a man-powered truck, so if they need manpower to see it, or respond. But it's not going to be a first-out truck to respond to a fire. The duty officers on the weekends have the ability of taking that truck home if they need to. But in the last couple of years, they haven't been doing that because of the lack of people. They still have to go to the fire station to get the truck on the road. But it's another thing the truck does. It's when they're weekend duty officers and they have to go deal with a burning permit complaint, they have that vehicle to use. They take it a lot more seriously when they show up in a town vehicle and say, "Hey, put your fire out," versus showing up in your Volkswagen Rabbit.
The other question was, looking through the bid specs, that you had mentioned getting it, of course, I assume that the truck's going to be ordered black.
Yep.
And then you're going to be doing some type of orange striping.
Yep.
Now, I mentioned there was a dollar figure on there for vinyl. Is that, did you plan on doing vinyl on this, or?
That was what this dealer put on there as an option, because he didn't want to give me pricing on paint, because he doesn't know what the price of paint's going to be when the truck comes in, so he didn't want to commit to that. That was something he did, and I haven't made that decision on what's going on, because the original intent was to try to have the dealership paint the truck before we showed up, because you know what happens when the vehicle gets here, things go all different directions. But I haven't really committed to that, because I'm talking to a gentleman from M&H Signs out of Westbrook who does the lettering for the police cruisers, and he does wraps. When I talked to him about Brush 3, he said that wrapping can be more expensive than painting. So depending on the design.
Potentially. I mean, it all depends what you're doing. But
right.
You were talking about just a cab. I mean, on this, you're talking about...
This was an exception he put, because originally I asked for a price option of paint, and he put that exception down to wrap.
So I seen that in the bid quote, but it wasn't part of that $45,000.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like it's pretty complete. I mean, it looks like something we need, and we get rid of something. We're just putting a lot of money in.
Yep.
I mean, it does have a 3-year guarantee.
And that's something we didn't have when we got the last pickup truck, because it was already 7 years old when we got our hands on it. So, yeah.
Any other questions from council?
I say buy it before it's 60.
Yeah.
They're going up fast every day.
Is there a time frame
while
on
you
this?
can.
Is this something they would have to order? Or?
Yes, and he says on here, the delivery is subject to the factory startup. So as soon as the factory starts production, that's when I'm going to estimate, looking at what happened with Public Works last year with the 3 trucks that got ordered. When they ordered them in August and they got them in March.
It's going to be a 23 truck then.
We're looking at 6 months before we see it.
Do you have the truck going to make 6 months?
It will. I'm hoping it will pass inspection, but we'll see.
All right. With that being said, all those in favor? Chief?
Thank you.
Order passed, 7-0. Order 2022-138, the town manager's request to go to RFP for legal representation for the town.
Good evening, Ryan McGee, interim town manager, requesting permission from the council to seek proposals from qualified applicants to serve as town attorney on a contractual basis under appointment by the town council. The town attorney will provide legal advice to municipal officials, town employees, boards, and committees, and will represent them in court as may be required. The attorney will also prepare and review contracts, deeds, leases, ordinance, etc., and reserve and provide opinions for the town on a variety of subjects. The attorney may be asked to attend town council or other meetings and hearings will be expected to provide legal assistance in prompt and efficient manner. The successful candidate will be licensed to practice law in the state of Maine and will demonstrate substantial training and experience in all areas of municipal law, including land use, labor and personnel relations, finance, civil and criminal litigation, real estate, risk management, and environment. I'm requesting to put the proposal out first thing tomorrow and have them due back by 1 o'clock on Thursday, June 17th, in order to present them to council the following Tuesday.
Mr. Chair?
Entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that the RFP for legal representation be approved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? I think we all know we've been working on this, and hopefully we'll have a, it's actually healthy to go out to bid every few years on all our contractual agreements that we have and non-contractual agreements we have. So this is the hope to be starting up with our new budget season. So with that being said, all those in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Order passed, vote 7-0.
Next item, please.
Other business, starting with council committee reports.
Alrighty. Lots been going on lately. School committee, I'm just working through their budget process, and they've been having a lot of questions and stuff with all the stuff happening all over the world, and hopefully we can address some of that tonight. Next one's planning board. I think we hit some of that, but
Yeah, last meeting, which was on the 26th of May, they received applications for conditional use for home daycare, for a rear lot, for craft subdivision, for review of the Public Works salt shed, and for Celine Goddard's fill permit. And all of that will be on the agenda this Thursday. So,
2 nights from now, right?
right. And a public hearing for those things.
Perfect. Lisbon Development Committee, I'm not sure. I haven't been in touch with him. And I believe there's a,
Meeting tomorrow.
Ross, next meeting,
Tomorrow night, yeah.
why don't you come sell yourself at the podium and see if you can bring in some new people.
Excellent. So we are doing a Lisbon Development Committee meeting tomorrow night. We'll be discussing a banner project that we're working on, going over the current CDBG stuff, and working on a couple other issues that we've been sort of planning and trying to get rolling. But always looking for new volunteers. We have 7 full-time and 1 alternate, but we're authorized up to 4 alternates, so we have 3 empty seats. So
Meeting is when and where?
6 p.m. right here tomorrow night.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Conservation Committee,
Nothing to report.
Parks and Rec. There's an open committee at this point in time, so if anybody has any interest in filling that position, that would be awesome. County budget, that's still kind of
Up in the air until, September, October timeframe. We'll have intensive meetings every week then.
While you're speaking, Mark, library. Anything to add?
Nothing new to report with the library except summer reading program is coming up, so get your kids signed up now.
And Water Commission.
Nothing real new. They are meeting on the 14th at noon this time. still dealing with the water issues downtown.
Ongoing, right? And Finance Committee,
Nothing new since the last report. We meet in 3 weeks, so.
yep, wrapping up the budget. It's kind of a lull there for a little bit, right?
Lull.
Town Manager's report.
I have a couple things to report. First is the update on the Portland Trust to Offset that the Finance Director and I have spoken about. Is accounted for by the auditors. I had a meeting with the Finance Director, the Chair of the Finance Committee, Curtis Lunt, and also Auditor Ron Smith last week. And it was explained that this money is accounted for in the audit, and it was in the general fund under undesignated funds and has not been touched since it was put there in 2016. Ron stated in our plan, Kayla and I is moving forward to do the offset of the budget as a solid plan, and we'll have no issue doing this. I want to make sure that we updated the council on this as well tonight. Second, the fence on the Miller Trail had to be made longer. That being said, it was approved to finish the project by me with an approximate cost of $1,400 more, which was money located within the budget to complete this project that has been long awaited. Thank you to everyone involved in order to get this project completed, as this will help keep the community safe along the steep embankment to the river, and I encourage everybody to take a look at the trail. Excuse me. Lastly, grants. I'd like to speak to the council about grants and some of the challenges that several department heads have faced, I can say, over the last year and a half as chief myself, but I'd like to update our grant procedures. It's come up before, and I'd like to allow the town manager to authorize non-matching grants to department heads for items that are at no cost to the town of Lisbon. Once the grant is approved, we'll have the department head come in before the council and request permission from the council to receive the grant funding and use the grant funding. I was looking to see if the town council would support this, as we have run into problems with not having enough time to do the grant before having to go in front of council. And again, this would not be for any grants that would cost the town any money. So I'd open that for if anybody had any discussion on that.
Would that be something that gets in policy?
That is something we could put in policy, but
Yeah.
I think it's more of a procedural, procedural in the past, but where there's a lot of grants that come up, and we find out about them on short notice.
But that would fix that if you made it part of policy that way.
Correct, and that would only be for grants that were at no cost. Yeah, anything that was going to be a matching grant or could going to cost the town money, then that's something that we need to go in front of the council first.
So the way it's written in our policy right now, any grant needs to be pre-approved by the council prior to application. Is that how it's written, or is that just been an assumption?
I think that's not. I believe that's how it was done previous by the town manager. I don't know as far as exactly what is written, or if there's something written specifically for grants. But for all grants, we've always brought those in front of the council. I think as more of a past practice.
I would think that it might be a good practice to put it in policy to do it that way.
Right.
The way we just
If we're gonna do it that way, I would definitely recommend writing up a policy, and we could vote on that.
Okay.
For
just a couple of lines.
Totally would support that, because it's kind of ridiculous that you have to come for us to ask for approval to ask for a $500 grant with no match is a little ridiculous.
You write the whole thing up and put it in there, then we don't have to have a hearing on it. We just have one meeting and approve it.
Okay. All right.
Right. I have a question before we go any
Yeah.
further. That you mentioned about the budget there and the money in the reserve. Now, what would that do to our total reserve as a percentage? Because our policy,
We're still going to be good as far as.
But what would number I'm asking for is our policy requires us to be at 12.5% reserve. So where would we be if we spend that money?
Yeah, that is correct. And actually, Kayla, if you wanted to come up to the podium as well, I actually invited our auditor to attend the next council meeting if we wanted to get into the numbers.
Okay.
But as of right now, we don't have all our revenue back. It looks very good. Ron said we are definitely financially stable, and we're financially stable to move forward with the plans that we had in the years to come, actually, and look into the investments that we talked about previously. He said that we would be within the confines of the percentage that we would need. I believe it was over. We have to keep 3 months.
Yeah, so it's 30 to 90 days operational for emergency purposes. So that's that 12% per charter, which we've taken into account, and it still puts us within all of
So we would still have 12.5% by
Correct, because we haven't been touching this money.
yes.
This money has been in Portland Trust. We have not been touching that money, and the money that actually we've been using right along has not actually come out of that account. So this is money that we do have, and he's highly encouraging that we do utilize the money.
And where we're coming close to the end of the fiscal year, that's also a factor that when fiscal year 22 ends and books close, that fund balance will be audited and would have a new number for council. So, the expectation is that we're financially healthy, and so that's going to continue to grow and continue to show that financial health.
And while you're up there, I'll ask you a question if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the amount that we're using to offset the salary changes, and what you perceived as being what we're going to collect before the end of this year as far as in revenues, is there really much of a difference? We're actually going to we're expected to get a large part of that in revenues before the end of the year to offset it. So the actual amount that's going to be deducted at the end of the game is not going to be a whole lot of money from this year. We're talking a few $100,000 at most, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think projecting out, I think we'll be, right back where we are right now. And as far as amounts and as far as fiscal health, I think it will pull us back to where we are, even taking that offset into consideration.
With all the accounts that we have, because we just don't have one general fund, we actually have multiple accounts that make up the general fund or undesignated funds. In a roundabout number, could you just give us an idea of what type of money that we have for liquid assets in a sense right now?
Sure.
In a roundabout, it doesn't mean because it changes every day, right?
It changes every day because that's kind of how fund balance works. You could receipt $1 million tomorrow, which would boost that, or I'd have to pay out $1 million tomorrow, which would reduce that. So it's a fluid number. It's a fluctuating number, and it changes day to day. But that's why we like to use the audited numbers, just because of that. You don't want to hang your hat on, today we received this amount of money for that reason. So the fiscal year 21's audit was showing a $3.4 million unassigned fund balance. So taking that 12%, that's reserving about $2 million for operational in case of emergency. So I like to use that $3.4 million as my benchmark right now, and then taking out that 12%. That difference is what we had to use for unassigned fund balance, which is just about $1.4 million or so.
And Kayla, if you can just explain to the council, last year, how much did we use out of that undesignated fund balance? What was allotted to it?
So
it was
the fiscal year 22 budget, $1,179,750 was allocated for unassigned fund balance. It was appropriated funds in our council orders for fiscal year 22. Thus far, we have expended $544,000 of that appropriated funds. So given that, and given the way that we're seeing these price changes, we're seeing, manufacturing timelines, difficulties in that. We've talked about the salt shed. The salt shed's a $450,000 allocation. That's part of that $1.179 million that was appropriated during fiscal year 23's budget season. That $450,000 salt shed will be reallocated to fiscal year 23. And same for the forklift for the solid waste department, because that one has not been built yet. So taking all that in consideration, that's how the fluidness of this really comes into play. As far as cash for, again, the audited financial statements fiscal year 21, cash and cash equivalents for the general fund only was $9,015,000. So when looking at that and looking at how we have to take that 12% into consideration at all times per charter, very financially healthy.
Yeah. And also, just to further add to that, Mark, to your question, we had the meeting with your father last week, and then we also followed up again with another meeting, because I want to make sure if we're spending the town's money, we're doing it correctly, okay? And I had the assistant town manager as part of the meeting, as well as the finance director and myself, and we had a Zoom meeting. And we went over this again to make sure that we were crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and make sure we're doing solid by the town. And he assured us and offered to come in and speak to us, to alleviate any questions, to say and explain what, that this is going to work very well moving forward, and how financially stable the community is, which is good to hear.
And he even reiterated that that $2 million that's in the Portland Trust, to pull it back into general operations for that, put it back into the general fund so that we can have these types of discussions. And that was his recommendation in March and his recommendation again today.
Yeah.
Financially in a better place than we've been in a long time. It's actually nice to see. So,
Any further questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay. The next thing moving forward, I had my last thing was the town manager's report. I just want to touch base. David Barrett from MMA, who's doing the search, town manager search, got back to us, and 13 applications we received for the town manager's position, which was good to hear. So that process is moving forward. So just want to touch base on that.
perfect. Questions on that? If not, we'll move to the next item.
Next item is the school resource officer request discussion with Chief McGee.
It's the chief. I'll listen.
Whatever you need to do, sir.
Chief spot.
Not going to argue.
Good evening. I want to take a moment and speak to you about our school resource officer position, as I've been approached by residents who have expressed concern on having to wait in order to get our resource officer back into the schools. We cannot put a price on the safety of our schools, and in my opinion, this position still be here today as it was 5 years ago at the police department. And we greatly appreciate the town council allowing us to apply for the grant funding in order to try and secure an SRO. I came before you last month requesting that permission to apply for a COPS grant. However, this grant is an unknown and is also a year plus out before we would receive any funding and be able to fill the position. I do not believe we should wait a year to get this officer back in the schools, as I believe the safety of our students and our staff has to be our top priority. Currently, we have only Officer Bernard sharing the responsibility of 4 schools. Thank you, Officer Bernard, for coming tonight. She patrols the schools of Gartley Street School, the Lisbon Community School, the Lisbon High School, and Sugg Middle School. 1,400 plus students, and that does not include our teachers and our support staff. This grant funding can only be used as new funding when it comes out, and could not start after the fact. So if we decided to fund it, it couldn't start after the fact if we were even able to get this funding. And I should also share that I have been working on this since that following day after the council meeting, and I have run into numerous issues with the grant due to our administration changing here at the town. And on top of our administration changing, in April, SAMS.gov changed how they do things with justice grants and also the COPS grants process. And before that change happened, I didn't know about it. Otherwise, I would have started working on it, but I don't have access to any of those counts. So I've been in the process of working on that. I do have the first step of the grant process completed, submitted, and that first step was approved, which allowed me to move forward into the second step of the grant process, which I'm still currently working on. Spent several hours on the phone today alone, several hours last week each day. Finance director helped me out today. It's been a lot of work, and we're going to still continue to work on it. However, I feel it is best to move forward on this now. And having an officer back in the Lisbon High School and Middle School starting in August, I think would be beneficial for our community. I will remove, my plan on this is, if we are able to do this, is not just to come in front of you and ask for this money without having a plan to move forward. So I will remove the $70,000 line item in the technology budget. Town manager gave me permission. He did. And what I'll do is I will take that $70,000 that was going to be utilized for security cameras and other security upgrades for the town office and the police department. And I'll take that money and I'll reallocate it to the fund and SRO position. The school resource officer pay range entry to 8-year step is $59,592 to $66,747.20, depending on the years of service, whether at the year step or not. Now, depending on benefits and the years of service, it could average $80,000 depending on benefits, so on and so forth. That would leave us $10,000 increase to the budget. I would then work with the new assistant town manager for a technology grant to fund the $70,000 that I would cut from the technology budget. This would ensure we put the appropriate resources in place this year and not wait until down the road. On a $10 million budget, this is an increase in layman's terms, like a cup of coffee per taxpayer a month is what it really boils down to when I work with the finance director in order to get our SRO back in the schools. And I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to come before you tonight just to bring this up again and discuss it further, because all of us unfortunately heard the news just a couple weeks after I first came in front of you asking to move forward on this grant. There is possibility of grant funding out there. The assistant town manager has already talked to me briefly about some funding that we may be eligible for, and we're going to start looking into that. And it's a possibility that we could use, I believe you said it was cybersecurity money?
Yeah, so when I was with the City of Portland, we were looking into this. The Build Back Better Infrastructure Act has appropriations for cybersecurity, and I don't know the exact appropriation number off the top of my head, but the state of Maine is going to get that money, and 80% of it has to go to local governments.
Millions, right? It was like a lot of
Well,
money.
I know the Jetport was the only one I saw, and that was low. That was $4 million they were getting, and then the rest is going to the state. The only thing I know from reading the language in the federal grant was they'll form a subcommittee at the state level. We reached out to the CIO back in Portland. We were told we would get a meeting. We didn't hear anything back. I have a workshop with Maine Municipal where me and the other town managers throughout the state are going to meet on Thursday, so I'm hoping to pick some brains and get an idea if there's anything coming out of the state office of when that money's coming or how it's being appropriated. But it's out there. It's just waiting for us to hear how we're going to get it and how much.
So that being said, I'd be shifting gears from applying for an SRO grant and then applying for a technology grant in order to offset that funding so we could still move forward. But I would come in front of you down the road to ask for permission to apply for that once we secured that.
Mr. Chair.
I'd love to hear a discussion.
Not to put anybody on the spot, but would it be beneficial for the public and for us to hear from Officer Bernard
I think it would.
personally?
And we also have Lieutenant Pickard. Because
I know she'd love to come up here and talk.
I'd love to have Officer Bernard come up, actually, and because Officer Bernard and Lieutenant Pickard, if you want to come up here as well, they were our school resource officers up until that position was cut. So it would be great to hear from them. So.
Hello, Renee Bernard, School Resource Officer. I don't know if you have questions for me, if you want me to just speak to the chief's request.
Yeah, if you want, I'll tell you a concern, and then you can address it. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, prior to the happenings lately in Texas, we were approached by chief and actually said that we were unmanned and understaffed and did not have the resources to take care of our schools correctly at that point. And as a counselor, that actually drew large attention when you hear people saying, "What can we do? How do we fix this?" And being a public official, I mean, really, if we can't control that, nobody can, right? Because we are the ones that actually make the determination whether we fund it or not. So, I reached out to Chief and many other people had also just to say, what do we need to do? And on our watch, we don't want this to actually say it was a budgetary item.
Right.
With his concerns about being understaffed, can you just explain kind of what your day's like? I mean, that's...
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So back when we had 2 school resource officers, we had 3 schools at the time, not 4. So we had a school resource officer that was full-time at the elementary school, and then it was actually myself that was split between the high school and the middle school. And so kind of both campuses were covered. You had a law enforcement presence there every day. Since the loss of the second SRO, it's, one person covering 4 buildings. Certainly, the Gartley Street School is not a big draw of my time. I do some proactive classes there with the kids. And that's, again, the biggest thing that this job affords is building relationships. And we can do that when we're in the classroom, when we're doing things. So right now I have 2 offices. I maintain an office at the high school, and I maintain an office at the elementary school, but it's one person, and I can only be in one place at one time. So I do try to do a lot of proactive things. I teach DARE. I'm a DARE certified instructor. I have been for 25 years anyway, give or take. So I teach a DARE program at the elementary school, 5th grade. We're actually having DARE graduation tomorrow. And then I teach in the fall, I teach a 7th grade middle school curriculum at the middle school. So those opportunities, get me with the kids doing some proactive things. But, unfortunately, a lot of the other things that I do, the other roles and responsibilities, tend to fall in the more reactive. You're responding to a school after a fight's happened, to do interviews and deal with how things are going to be handled and work with the schools to solve some of those things. But
Do the kids often, or to what degree do the kids reach out to you?
So it is, that's one of the biggest things. I've often said that you could, even in our small town, you could put a school resource officer in the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school, and they would be busy all day. Because when you're there, it's not just students, but staff are popping in. So when you're in the building, it's certainly easier. People see you. They're like, oh, I have a question. They take advantage of having that FaceTime with you. So, every day, I get kids that come into my office, even at the elementary school level, whether they're coming up to share, that they have a positive office referral, so they're looking for that high five and for you to celebrate the fact that they've done something good in class. Or at the high school, where my office is, kids might pop in at lunchtime and, do you have a second? Can I talk to you? And it's sometimes questions about, I'm not sure when my 9 months is up, or, how do I find out, when I can have a passenger with me. So, again, it's when you're there, you have the ability to answer questions, and I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I have a question for you. So you never take a day off, right? You never have any vacation time. So what happens when you're not able to go? I mean, it's basically that's
right,
because we've been on the staff for a long time.
Yep.
So
I definitely try to limit the amount of time that I'm gone, because there is just one school resource officer. But, certainly when there were 2 of us, we never, we would communicate, okay, I have something going on, I have a class going on, I have a vacation that I want to take that's during the school months, and we would coordinate to make sure that there was still a school resource officer in town. Lieutenant Picard is my supervisor. Back in the day when it was him and I as SROs, we had a different supervisor. So there's 2 to 3 people that are, able to cover schools, respond to schools when we're staffed at that level.
Council, any other questions? I think it's something that was brought to us. Something that was a genuine concern and something I think we need to address. And it is a small piece of this budget. I would love to think that we're doing a lot more reactive stuff than proactive. Proactive, not reactive, sorry. Because that seems like it's, when you're on the staff, that seems what you do, right? You just put out fires all day and you really don't have an opportunity to get the stuff done that needs to be done and be aware of what's happening.
And I think Officer Bernard's downplaying a little bit, as much as I've seen her stay after her shift and continue to deal with parents throughout the day, following up just to make sure that she's actually touching base with these parents, because she can't get to everything during the day. And I know there's probably people viewing, or maybe even sitting in this room, that think, well, there's other people working in the police department during the day. Why can't they handle it? Well, for one, lately, this past year, I don't know what's in the water, but it's been very busy. On top of that, we're not trained school resource officers. Actually, NASRO, they strongly encourage not to do that and have regular officers in there. They're trained to work with kids in the school. They build relations. There's numerous times throughout our career where we go to a very bad situation with little children there, and the first thing they say is, because they built relationships, hey, do you know Officer Bernard? Hey, do you know Officer Picard? To this day, I have little kids They're calling me Officer Pickard. I don't know how we look alike. Better than I do. But we can laugh about it. But we're doing a good thing at Lisbon PD and building those connections. And there's not one officer at the PD that hated to lose that position when we lost it. And I think it's because we do build good relationships and we try to be proactive with the police department that it can only do one thing: benefit our community. Because we're not just sitting in a classroom. We're actually engaging with the students. Officer Bernard's engaging with the students, engaging with the staff, and that's important.
So the makeup of before, when it was the two, were they both SROs partially paid for by the school?
Correct.
And this one will be a different position where it would actually be 100% on the community, which at the end of the day, folks, it's the same pocketbook. So, I mean, it doesn't make a difference, but the capabilities you actually have or the lieutenant have to actually use that SRO is a little bit different with that circumstance, right? So they can actually do some more community building,
Correct.
Different events other than just the school. It'd still be
when there's days that we have a school where if we have a day where it's going to be professional development day and no kids there, or if it's a half day, we can adjust the officers' hours and we can utilize an activity in the afternoon at the MTM Center where we have new things that we started at the police department. We've started this rape, aggression, defensive tactics training. It's geared towards women. We've sent Officer Kenny, our female officer, it has to be female instructor, and we also have sent Kate Medor, who's the recreation department administrative assistant. And we're teaming with the rec department. We're going to start offering classes to women in this community that can be trained by women that work for the town to be able to learn defensive tactics, to be able to protect themselves. I met with the principal at the high school, Susan McGee, and asked her about, hey, what about offering 1-hour blocks at the school where we can teach girls before they go off to high school the real world defensive tactics? And they thought it was an absolute wonderful idea. There's been a few things outside of our control with an officer getting hurt and being short where we haven't been able to start it up. But now having the second person being Kate, we are going to start that up. And it's going to be good to be able to incorporate more functions and be able to do more community policing as well. There's other events that we can do, or not events, but other trainings that we can do in the afternoon hours at the recreation center or even at the high school that we aren't currently doing right now.
Perfect. Any other questions?
Obviously, the impetus for this is, I would guess, is the events in Texas, which weigh heavy on everybody's minds. And as that situation there becomes more and more under the microscope, it looks like there were some issues on the way that was handled. In the event you get the second SRO, and I understand the programs, and that's great, but with the emphasis on safety in the schools, will you increase training for active shooters? Perhaps Lieutenant Pickard could answer
Yes,
that.
absolutely. We actually already have, even long before this started, and we have been.
And before you answer,
Yep.
Is there any policy currently written for the police department and the school department as far as active shooter
We do have emergency
response and training for active shooter situations?
Yep, I can answer that. So we do have an emergency response for the school department, which Officer Bernard actually did a great job updating the book for the emergency response. She spent a good portion of last summer, and she did an excellent job doing that. And as far as the training, every time a negative incident happens like this, and we hear something about this, we look at our training, and we look at some of the things we're doing. We have been doing training. We have done training. We just did recently. We just did simulations training. We've already had talks before this incident started or happened to do a active shooter situation at one of our schools, and Lieutenant and I have met, and we're actually going to spend a day. Actually, probably going to do it over 2 days. We're going to use the bus from the MTM Center, and it's going to be mandatory where every officer goes to every single school, and we learn the layout of every single school in the community. On top of that, I've heard, obviously, as well as you and probably everybody in this room, about the different responses to that school. probably be a long time until we hear exactly what really went down at that school. But what I can say is some of the things that I've heard are, it's troubling. But we need to make sure that we have the tools in place to make sure we can get into the building and take care of business. We have to be proactive. And that being said, I heard that one of the things I heard was that they had a hard time getting into the classroom. Well, we have Rams and we have Halligans in our cruises. I've actually gotten more over the past year. But since then, I've actually reached a point where I'm, okay, are we using them correctly? Are we using them the right way? Because I don't know. I never had an official training on how to use an Halligan. And you stick it in the door jamb and you pry like heck and it'll open up. But there's actually a way to do it. And there's a 2 to 3 hour class, which my lieutenant has reached out to a trainer. And we have a trainer that's going to give every officer in the department actual training on how to breach a door. And we also placed an order to put specialized tools in our cruisers in order to make sure that a single officer, heaven forbid we have to respond to an event, can breach a door single-handedly, get through that door, and then address the threat. We do skill builders in firearms. My lieutenant has put together a great skill builder. It's a one-officer skill builder. And we're actually doing firearms this week. It's mandatory for every officer. It's a one-officer breach into a situation where they have to take down the threat. We all hope we never have to use it, but it's important that we train. And it's important every time we think outside the box. We always got to be thinking outside the box. When we hear something, we don't avoid it. We don't ignore it. We learn from it. We learn from other people's mistakes, and we try to better ourselves and pray to God that this never comes to our community. But what we can do is make sure we have everything possible in order to prevent something. So, everything to add to that?
Just cap what the chief is saying, that, we can look at an active shooter situation. It's horrible to talk about, but active killing inside of a school, commercial building, the Farwell Mill, it could be one of the easiest responses that we have in law enforcement. Because we're training our staff now, when there's active killing, we don't have a choice. We have to go in and stop that threat. And we're really, at that point in time, throwing every tactic that we train in out the window. Because we're not stopping at doorways and clearing rooms. We hear active killing, we're responding to eliminate that threat to save lives. It's when the shooting and the killing stops, then we have to slow down a little bit. And that's why we're implementing these special tools, this specialized training, what we're doing for the last 2 days out on the range. And I think my officers can attest to that. So, it really is like the event itself, from a law enforcement point of view, is pretty easy, right? Go in there and eliminate the threat. Hope we never have to do it. But if we do, that's what we're training to do. It's when the dynamic situation slows down a little bit that we have to be prepared for. And I'll just add on what Officer Bernard said. It's, when we had 2 SROs in the school, it's not a matter of programming at that point in time, looking at it from a school safety point. It's a matter of having 2 bodies in the school, not a dummy, cruiser parked out in front of one of them that, matter of time, people are going to be like, well, they just park it there. There's no officer in the school. But if I had my stats in front of me, and I'm sorry, I'm unprepared tonight with that, you'll see that statistics will show when there's armed officers inside of a school, it's very unlikely to have an active shooter type incident inside that school. These bad guys, these bad girls, they're cowards. They don't want to be faced with a deadly force or force-on-force situation. So, unfortunately, they pick the softest of all targets. Uvalde, Texas, elementary school, right? Not armed security on campus at the time. That's the information that I'm hearing. So, he was able to walk in and create carnage because there was no threat there for him. When law enforcement did show up, it was very, and they actually gained access. The events inside the school, that timeline was just moments before that threat was ended. It was too long, I'll agree. But so there's something to be said about having bodies, armed bodies, trained bodies, police officers in our schools, protecting our staff and our most precious kids. One is not able to do it, right? I mean, think of our layout of our schools. It's not on one solo campus. Even if it was, it'd be inadequate. But we're spread out over miles. And she does a great job, and she has for years. But it really boils down to having numbers inside of that school, in our schools.
I think you hit a valid point. You know, having an officer in the school is a huge deterrent.
It's a
right?
deterrent.
Very much so, right? And that's where we need to be, is proactive, right? And have that in place for sure. And I think the council definitely supports what the chief is asking for and what you're asking for. Today, you can't take the chance, right?
You can't put a price on it.
It's not 20 years ago, right? Today is just a different world. Crazy, crazy, right? So
some officers today during firearms said, you're not really hearing about this in the larger cities. Actually, right. I think it was Officer Sainamont, right? We're not hearing about it so much in Boston, New York, San Diego, L.A. They have the police officers in the schools. They were one of the first to develop, right, back in the early 80s. They have the metal detectors and the bullet-resistant glass. And so it's the little towns that this is happening. Uvalde, Texas didn't plan on starting their day ending in a nightmare, right? Those parents thought they were sending their kids to school like they did every other day, and the school was going to protect them, and they were wrong, because that's where that villain went, and they targeted the softest of targets. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in, and they just go after body count. They want to increase those numbers. And we've got to do ourselves, our community diligence, by really, hitting this before it hits here.
Yep.
Any other questions?
You really have three,
Thank
not
you.
two, right?
Yeah.
You guys feel you have all the tools that you need in case of a situation like that, or is there more that the council could do to back you guys up?
Well, currently, actually, we were just reassessing, my lieutenant and I, and actually Sergeant Levesque, who was a member on the fire department for years and did different types of door breaching. There was things that we were assessing to see what we needed. And we just moved forward on purchasing some items. And in the future, we're going to purchase some more. And I put out a directive to all my supervisors to start researching for grants. That way we've started looking kind of outside the box. One of my sergeants brought up a great idea. Hey, let's get an expandable ladder. You never know when we're going to need a ladder to get to a window, to get in. So just thinking outside the box, asking your people, like, hey, what do you think? Utilizing everybody in our agency, and if it comes to a point where I need more funds for that, I'll come to the council. Right now, we're addressing some of the situations that brought to my attention that maybe some of the, not shortfalls, but some of the areas that we can improve on, which I think is important.
And we do have ballistic shields, and I know if you saw the news in Lewiston, you saw a guy with a ballistic shield with a line behind him. We do have ballistic shields.
We do.
I know because in my time there, I trained with them. Excellent shot, I must say.
I'll give him that. He is a very good shot.
But we do have those tools, which are important, obviously.
Tactical team, I mean, it's one of those questions that, how far away is the tactical team? I mean, not
the last time that we had a TAC team come to town, well, I won't say where it was, but it was over an hour before they were assembled. I mean, you and I have been together when they've been called out before years past. It's a long time, but we're not waiting for a tactical team. If something happens at one of our schools or one of our businesses, one of our big facilities in town, heaven forbid one of our town buildings, we're not waiting. We're going. Every one of my officers know we're going. If there's an active shooter, we're not waiting, we're going, and we're eliminating the threat, and they're trained to do that.
Any other questions at all, or?
Do we have a motion?
Well,
no, we don't.
It wasn't written as a motion because one of the things that we do need to do is our next meeting will be actually ratifying and finishing the budget. So, this had to be in it. Since I talked to Chief last, he's actually pulled money out of the budget to kind of balance the budget from where the numbers we were before, minus $10,000, I think.
Correct.
I'm not really sure what we actually need. Lisa, can you tell us, do we actually need an official motion to actually do this? Or can we just make a recommendation that this be updated on the budget?
Yeah.
Yep.
The budget issue.
Or a motion to add a school resource officer position to the police department in this budget.
Just do it in your budget.
Just, you can,
Do it in this budget.
you don't need to make a motion here. You need to do it during the budget review.
Okay. So we'll just add it to the budget review then.
As a straw poll, is there anybody on council that actually has a question about this being needed or not needed?
No, I think it's well overdue, right?
You'll be on the record saying no. Just want to make sure. No pressure.
I mean, to be honest, I wish we had the budget to do 4 of them
Yeah.
and have one in each school.
You know.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to be honest about this, that's what we need. Whether that will happen in the future, I don't know. I think it should, because I think if we're going to have it, we're going to have it the right way.
So with that being said, so you're going through your grant process.
Yep.
Your grant doesn't limit. I know you said that you have to put a number of officers in your grant, and that actually reflects on if you get the grant or not.
Correct.
So, in a sense, we could update our count and actually still keep moving forward with the grant as you are.
That's correct.
And there's a potential that we could actually see that in a year and a half, a opportunity for third
I
position.
can
if
still
that's the
move
case.
forward on the grant and then bring that in front of you if it's awarded.
That'd be great. And add another one if you get the grant. It'd be great.
All right.
Excellent.
If we're all good with that, anything else to add? We thank you for everything, for everything you're doing. I'm sure it's actually a job that actually goes unthanked a lot, but we thank you.
Thank you.
Now, you mentioned another McGee. It seems like every time we have a discussion, you mention someone else who works in towns or construction that's McGee. Is
No
this-
relation to McGee Construction. Say that again.
And how about the person at the school?
No relation to Susan McGee at the school. That's spelled a different way, at
Just
least.
say, yeah. Just a lot of
My
McGees
guys say
going
they
on.
drive by the construction equipment on Main Street. One of my detectives said, I drive by the sign. I see McGee all over town.
Don't let your head swell up anymore.
Next item, please.
Next item is Town Council Remote Meeting Policy Discussion.
Don, you don't know anything about this, do you?
Well, this is the same thing that basically that I wrote previously, and we sent it to our current then town attorney, and he came back with a few tweaks, but basically that's what it was. And I had put in the concerns that had been part of council, and that was that the long-term remote attendance shall mean instances of more than 3 consecutive regular meetings or more than 6 regular meetings in a rolling year. In other words, the policy discourages that. And so that's kind of defines what that is. So other than that, if we are going to have this policy, we have one right now that only allows us to meet in emergency situations when we're all remote. And this would allow some people to be remote and some people in the building, or one person or whatever, like the planning board has and the school board has and the LDC has similar remote meeting policies. So if we're going to have it, all we have to do is say, yes, we're going to have it, and we'll have a hearing. We have to have a hearing, and then that's it.
Do we have the technology right now to make this actually meet the requirements of what our
So I can answer that. So we can do Zoom by this device. It looks like a TV, but it's really a computer. We can do Zoom by it. We do have to update, and Lisa's already been in touch with them, but we do have to update it to have a microphone or incorporate that microphone into these microphones. So whoever's on that device can hear everything. But I also wanted to see if we can incorporate that so the viewers can see it. So when you watch live screen, whoever is remote is on that screen so they can see them as well and hear them just as good.
So the person wouldn't be on that screen. They would actually be in a sub-screen of what they're watching.
They'd be on that screen right next to us. So say you weren't here and you were up on that screen, you would be on that screen right next to us, but the viewers would be able to see the council, but then maybe, if it's possible, have them on the screen as well so it's nice and clear for them. But for the counselors, you'd be in the room, but just on the wall in the room.
And Don, I read through it, but just, we're still, someone that's remoting in does not actually count towards a quorum.
Yes, it is.
It would.
Yes. That's the state thing.
So is there a minimum number of people that would have to be here physically? If you have one person and 6 people remote?
I didn't write it that way,
I'm
but
just trying to.
Don't you need 3 to have a quorum?
Well, first of all, you have to. Anybody meeting meets the quorum.
Okay.
Whether they're remote or otherwise. and that's the state thing. But as far as if you're going to meet remotely, or somebody wants to meet remotely, the policy says that you check as much as a week ahead of time, or at least a week ahead of time, and say, I'm going to be out of town or whatever. Can I meet remotely? And it's, again, falls on the chair to basically, and the committee to say, okay, we don't want to have the whole council out there. We might as well meet an emergency session if we're going to do that. So it doesn't make any sense to abuse it. I mean, you're sitting amongst a bunch of responsible people generally.
No, yeah, I mean, I would definitely see it be as a rarity more so than a become a norm.
No.
I mean, I don't, if I'm here, or if any of us here are taking our due diligence to be here, I don't think someone needs to be in the campground in the camper because they're away remoting in. I mean, to me, it's more of an emergency type of process.
On the other hand, if you know that, for example, there's going to be votes on something, you want the whole council in on it, that might be a situation if somebody's got to be absent for whatever reason.
I think the policy, I think COVID actually showed us that we have to have a policy. We have to be a little bit more proactive, the idea to keep everybody included. I mean, to me, it comes down to just technology, right? If we have the technology to make it work, I mean, I've seen a lot of Zoom meetings go really south because of technology really wasn't adequate. But I would just want to make sure that we tested it and actually had the ability to, whether someone's sitting in the back room some night just to test it. I mean, I would like to think that we actually have a handle on it prior to actually implementing it at any level, but it sounds like the first step is to vote it and then go to hearing, and then we could actually work out the details. And I guess my point is I think we're going to have to spend some money on technology to make sure this works. And I don't know if, what type of device has to be on the other side to meet the requirements, but it seems so people do it with their phones today, which is really irritating sometimes because you get everything but what you want, but
I'm just concerned about how open it is that you could have, a very controversial situation that people want to come and you have the room packed and 6 counselors decide to attend by video, and it's kind of cowardly to not be in the room and face the public. So, I mean, I understand the situation you're trying to deal with, Don, where it's like, okay, you go away for a vacation and you want to still be able to, be part of the meeting, but I just worry that it's so open that you could have, one person in the room.
If we've got 7 responsible
Well, you can't assume that people will always be responsible.
Who's going to go decide if they want to be one of...
I've seen councils in other parts of the country where if they could flee the room, they would.
I mean, I think
some of them should.
Yeah. I think Don's point is that regardless who's the chair, it's going to be something that needs to be pre-approved and not something that's actually done on the spur of the moment. And you mean if a council is going to be away and there is some items, especially going through the budget and stuff, and if it's an excused absent, I think that we would actually handle it much like we do with any other absent. I mean, if someone's away,
it's not an absence if you're meeting remotely, but yeah.
But whether or not we actually approve the idea as a council that it's adequate. I mean, because we've seen in past where councilors can, use the ability to come in as little as possible, and I would think
well, that's why the part of going through the process.
Chair. Yep.
And if you just don't want to show up, you don't have to show up. But if you want to meet, why would you want to just not show up if I don't know. Anyway.
So what is the step? I mean, at this point in time, I mean, it's not really actually in there as an order to actually vote on.
To a hearing.
Yeah.
Don't we have to draft anything, any change to the current policy?
Oh, this is it. Oh, yes, this would be the change in the policy, yeah.
So don't we actually have to do a first reading prior to going to hearing? No? We just send it to a hearing?
All it says in the statute is you have to have a hearing. It's pretty informal. So it's more like a policy. It's a policy, not an ordinance.
Right.
So, but the state just said you have to have a hearing before you do it. So we could vote to establish the policy pending.
We vote to go to a hearing and then have the vote after.
Yeah, that's probably best
right.
way to do it.
That's what you do.
So put it on the agenda for that, and then.
So we're going to do it next meeting, Harry. You can actually remote in while you're away, and we can actually see if it works. So
remote to the remote.
Yeah, and see how that plays out. I mean, I'm all set bringing it to a hearing because we can have more discussion, but I mean, it's up to council. I mean, this is a...
Let's bring it to the hearing.
Feelings? And we're in a new world today. It's not a new world, but COVID actually changed a lot of things when it came to remote type meetings. So I would love to see it play out though with some night, if whoever it is that can, run us through the process, whether it's a workshop or not, just to see how it actually works,
I think I might be able to grab somebody that knows IT, and we might be able to work with it.
I mean, the option is a surrogate. How much? If we don't want to do a Zoom, we can do a surrogate.
And have someone come in your place.
No, I think that's even worse. I think you should face the public when you're in this position.
So let's, I guess let's bring it to a hearing. I'm not sure, I mean, we will not actually have all council here next meeting, and we're gonna be talking about budget, so we probably can go out a couple. Is that okay with council?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have one meeting in July and August, we have two in June. So basically it's me and one meeting in July, is that?
July 19th, I think it is.
Sound right?
Let's see. Yeah, the 19th.
So we have plenty of time to look at it, think about it, maybe even do some test runs or something in between to see how it works out.
Are you saying it's a heavy agenda next time?
We do have.
They fill up pretty
Well, I mean, if
quickly.
you want to.
What's the budget next time?
They've been filling up really quickly. So it has to do, a lot of the work that we've been doing requires one meeting to set a hearing, another to have the hearing, and then, and so when you need at least two council meetings for hearings to make changes or get work done, then that's what is filling the agendas.
St. Don, you want to do the hearing next meeting? Is that your thoughts? Because if
Well,
we go up to
it's-
July, then it's
yeah.
August, and then it's
If it
actually.
gets as much attention as the rest of the hearings do, it probably won't take long.
But I can say that the next meeting does have room for I don't think it's overloaded. It'll be it won't be as full as today's. So
Let's do it next.
All good?
Sounds like a good school.
Okay.
We're playing.
Harry, you gonna remote in and check it out?
I am going to,
All right.
on my boat in the Chesapeake
Next
Bay.
week,
All right.
June 21st.
So that is that. If we're all good, we will actually move on to the next item, please.
Okay. Next item is appointments, Order 2022-139, the appointment of an alternate member to the Lisbon Development Committee. The appointee is Linda Barabee. And she did complete her application. I handed out copies of it to everybody. She's a local person who is looking to be involved in some way, and an alternate member to the Development Committee would be a good way for her to begin some involvement or committee work.
Not familiar, anybody on council familiar with Linda?
We're familiar with her here in the town hall, and she seems very anxious to
Serve in some manner?
serve. Right? Yeah.
More the merrier, I think. I mean, if we have an opening and there's someone standing in line to do it, I think it's all good. So, entertain a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All those in favor? Perfect. Thank you very much.
Order passed. Vote 7-0.
And is she going to be aware of the meeting tomorrow night?
Yes,
is.
because I let Ross know ahead of time.
Perfect. Thank you. That's awesome.
Next item is Councilor Communications.
Well, Mr. Chair, remember what I said I was going to bring up regarding Rumbo? On March 15th, Councilor Smith, seconded by Councilor Lunt, moved to postpone the survey mailer on Rumbo until we get a new economic development director, or has been hired, or a goal to mail by July 1st. Could we put this thing on the agenda to move one way or another with it, please?
I am all set putting this on next agenda so we can actually have a council discussion and move it forward or back it up or park it or just whatever we figure out our needs are. So.
Yep.
Where we left it was we were discussing the survey, and Mark particularly had issues with the explanation of the park. So we'd have to do something. Somebody has to do something to fix that.
If we move forward in that way, we would have to. Yes. Any other? Is that it, Don? I thought you were going to have more than that. That's easy. Any other council communications at all? If I may, Chief, We actually had an article in the paper that actually came out. Could you actually just give a quick overview? Because I had some calls today wanting to know how quickly we were going to build a new fire station, and I was trying to explain that this is the start of a process that's actually
Start of a long process.
Yep. And maybe you could actually just give an incentive, not an idea, incentive, but an idea, because we kind of, Yarmouth was put into that article saying that this company actually did some of the research for Yarmouth. How long of a process was that?
I'm not sure how long Yarmouth's process was, because Yarmouth used the same company for their study and through their design and actual design process and build process. So their project's a little different. Ours, we gave them 180 days or 6 months to get the study back. For time we gave them the award to get the study complete, and we're in the infancy stages of that study. So to give an idea of how this article came about, was the reporter was here in the audience the night that the bid was awarded to Port City, and she was talking to us out there. She wanted to do a story, and then she cornered me. I say cornered me, but she got me while she was interviewing me after the fire we had last week, and wanted to do a story on this. So I agreed to meet with her yesterday, and we went over the intent of the study. Now, for the listening public, this study is one part of a large process. The town can't make any decisions of what the town needs to do until we have information. So this is just gather information so we can make decisions on what route we want to go before we even make decisions on where, what, when, and how things are going to happen.
Don would use this statement, smart growth, right? So, we're in
right.
the process of trying to figure out what smart growth is, right? Does that work, Don?
So the extent of the study is to figure out the first and foremost, the very first meeting we had, Chief McGee and I had with the firm, was just looking at what space that we're looking at we think we're going to need. And then they're going to come in and look at the space we currently have, look at the facilities we have. From a fire standpoint, they're going to be looking at the current practices in the fire service and how things work, or things should be working today, and what we have for space and how things work in our stations. And it just kind of goes in that direction. And how the service is growing, and how my department's growing, and there are certain things we know could be happening in the next 5 years, but we can't go that direction without dealing with facilities. So this, again, it's a one part of a multi-step process before we even get to the point, go to referendum to ask the voters to approve this. So it was just.
Well, you need a referendum for the money.
And I think
Absolutely.
it's important. You mentioned the idea of your department growing, but the growing is much different than it used to be growing 10, 15 years ago, when it was actually growing by volunteers, and now it's actually growing in a different process.
And as our community, as the community grows, the services are going to grow, and my department has adjusted over the years. I think the term fire department is an antiquated term, because a fire department, for what we do, fire is a very small part of what we do. So it's just, as we are doing more and more things, I've got twice the call volume today than we did 20 years ago, with fewer fires. So we're doing a lot more stuff, a lot more variety of things. The number of fires has gone down, which just means those fires are more dangerous for us because we don't have the experience to deal with like we used to.
I think the word first responder goes a long ways, because no matter what you're responding to, you're usually the first one to respond to it, right. Whether it's whatever, traffic accident, fire, or... And
there's always that joke out there, and I was like, hey, if you have a law enforcement problem, someone's breaking into your house, you call the police department. You're having a medical emergency, you call an ambulance. If you don't know who to call, you call the fire department, because we'll come handle just about everything except for people with guns. Leave it up to Chief McGee.
Perfect. Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, it's a great opportunity for you to explain a little bit, because people, I'm not one that really, as people know, I'm not a big one on studies, but at the end of the day, we do really have to have a non-biased look of what the trends are and what we ought to be doing to try to do smart things. So.
And as I said in the article, this study will give us information. It's not going to make our decision for us. So the town can make an informed decision in which direction the town feels is best to go for the community. So that's the start.
Perfect, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other communications from council at all? Items, concerns, otherwise? Go ahead, Mark.
Brian, would you like to address the gentleman's concern about the marijuana stores?
Absolutely, yep, I apologize for that. So and council can add in, so when the process was going through the planning board, there was quite a bit of talk as far as for yes, no, should we limit it, should we not limit it? And there was a lot of discussion about that, and a lot of people came in to speak, and the planning board actually had multiple hearings on it, and so did the town. And the hardest thing that we did as a council is just trying to figure out how do we limit it. I mean, as it's a free market, do we actually limit it to 1 or 2 stores or a dozen stores? A lot of the communities around us, some were putting limits and some weren't. I think what we're starting to see now a little bit is the idea of, as you mentioned, maybe an oversaturation a little bit in a sense where we're actually seeing in some areas more stores actually going away than actually coming in. I don't know if, in a sense, that if we put a moratorium that we would actually get any more information than we did when we actually spent 2 years on it when we were trying to figure it out and putting it into our ordinances and into our zone and zoning and where it fit into the other criterias of the town. We definitely asked for a lot of input at that point in time, and most of the people were controlled where it was, I mean, as far as for the cultivation versus the retail. And I think we actually did our due diligence at the time, trying to figure the correct locations for those. And, I'm not sure if, Dawn, if you want to add something as far as the planning board. I mean, there was a fair amount of work that actually went through this at all levels.
Yes, and it was debated quite heavily. And if truth be known, I was one of those who thought there should be limits. But the majority of the people that were considering it said it's a free market. It'll be self-regulating in that attriting those that don't do well, just like any other business. And that was the philosophy that won the day. So I still think that there is a tendency to oversaturate. Maybe it's a new thing. Maybe it'll go away in 5 years, that there won't be an oversaturation. But I do know that many people have commented to me that there's a pretty obvious collection of marijuana stores, both recreational and adult use, around here. Not just here, but in Lewiston as well. I also know Thompson has done some limiting things, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
The other part of the question was the idea of, do we know how many are in the works or actually in not? I know there's one new facility that's actually opening up on Main Street, which I believe is the first recreational facility in town. One of the things that the town did at that point in time, and not that money directs everything, but yet the idea of the application fees and stuff were put pretty heavy on the recreational, just to make sure that there could be adequate background and make sure the process was serious, that they were going to do it correctly. How many of those we see? I don't really see a whole lot of applications like we did initially when they first came through. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but
yeah. To my knowledge right now that I've seen on our level, there is a couple right now.
I know of 3 right now that have expressed interest in 3 different properties along 196.
No applications, for...
Nothing before the planning board. No.
Yeah. The discussion about a moratorium, I mean, I'm not sure if that would be at a council level or...
I think
It's complicated because
if a moratorium question is appropriate for the council, I would be in favor of it. And I think it probably is, because I've seen municipalities across the state pass moratoriums. And I don't know whether that's their form of government that allowed them to do that, but I would imagine that.
No, we had that. The communities had to opt in on it. I assume you can do a moratorium as well until you figure out what process you want to go through.
When this first came out, there's a lot of no state guidance. I mean, they told us we could do a lot of things, but we really couldn't do them, and then they changed the rules as we went. Like every time we tried to actually vote on something, it seems though that things were changing on what we could or what we couldn't. Initially, we supposedly couldn't even ask questions because it was medically related, and it was a doctor-patient privilege, and I mean, there was a lot of things that we actually went through, and it was really kind of frustrating. Matter of fact, we know of and don't know of a lot of facilities in the community that are operating that we really don't know because they didn't have to go through the permitting process initially, so they're kind of unknowns. Most people have a pretty good idea of what's happening in town in a small community, but yet, the state, I don't think really has given us the tools yet to actually even, do the research necessary to actually try to get these permitted or not permitted in certain areas.
Certainly look into it, though.
Yeah, we definitely, I mean, there has been, since we've actually done some of the last planning board work and zoning work and ordinance work, there has been some changes, I believe, in the state. So it may be worthwhile just kind of looking into and just trying to see. I mean, to me, I'm only one of 7 councilors, so I mean, the idea of looking at it and if there's a concern, if there's an opinion, we could always bring it as a discussion and actually see what type of input we get. I got to be totally honest with you. We went through this for a couple of years, and the amount of public input was very, very minimal that actually gave us direction on this level anyways. Yes, sir, you can come right back up and speak. And I apologize I didn't bring that up earlier.
Thanks. So I guess I'm wondering, the initial discussion it was kind of on, maybe it wasn't on people's realization of what would happen. It was really the idea of being able to accept, marijuana in general. And I think the fact that the town was split, it's kind of a libertarian idea, but as we've seen what happens, people may have a different view of it in town than they did originally. So the idea of nobody's going to have a hard time with people smoking or drinking or anything else, but the idea of what's happened is kind of different from maybe the original question. So the business use and the proliferation of this is maybe a different sense and gives a different flavor to the town, it seems to me, a different culture that as you come into town and you see it developing the way it is, that maybe people have a different view of it if it went to a referendum or if it went to some kind of attempt to take a look at it. I know there are other people that may want to speak on this.
Go ahead. Please come up.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're here for you, so that's. And again, I do apologize that we didn't discuss it earlier.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name's Emily. I live on Pine Street. And I just want to say how much, I moved here less than a year ago, and I absolutely love this town. So I'm here speaking on behalf of this issue, rooted in that, and how thrilled I am to be living here, and how excited I am to hopefully in the future raise a family here. I think there's a delicate balance between adult use businesses versus businesses that anybody can walk into. And when you start to have too many of those adult use businesses, whether it's cannabis or myriad of other types of uses, it starts to become uncomfortable and like a place that families, teens, children don't really feel like they belong, because those businesses aren't geared to that demographic. And I think that we're at a little bit of a tipping point. And I would be very much in support of some kind of moratorium to just explore the issue. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Yeah, come right up.
My name is Leon. I live at 57 Main Street. I live here with my wife and our 6 kids, and I have got an eldest who's just on the cusp of, she's 11 years old, going on 16 or so. And we've been talking a lot about how we'd like them to be able to spend their time in town and kind of bouncing off of what Emily said, but really visioning for the future. You know, I've lived here for all 37 of my years, you know, except for maybe college. And I still love this town, and we've put our roots down here, and we hope our children do. But I guess what is concerning is that, you know, if I would like to send my 16-year-old out at 7 p.m. on a Friday, and 4 of the 8 options downtown are adult use facilities, obviously it's not legal for them to go into them, but I'm just saying that sort of the feeling of the downtown and the identity of the downtown that my children are formed in becomes a different matter than a place that has, you know, right now it's got sort of a decent mix, and it'd be nice to see that mix become, you know, even more diverse with a more diverse number of businesses. I don't know what they would be, but I'm sure there are creative people out there who might have a great idea. So just again voicing my concern about maybe dreaming up sort of a more positive approach to this issue that could sort of allow a greater diversity of places for our children to spend time. Thank you.
Perfect. Great, come on up. You waited here all night, so I'm going to give you all the time you like.
The one thing I would add about that is I think there's a distinct advantage with marijuana growing operations that would, if there are 3 pending, that tells me that if we have vacancies, it's what happened. I think I heard the one vacancy we were going to have a brewery, but that all of a sudden some marijuana growing facility came in with a lot more money. So I think there's the money is on the growing facility side and on the marijuana side, and I think it leaves people at a disadvantage. So I think that's why a moratorium would be helpful, so that we could look at a cap. I mean, people are here, great. Seems to be, how many do we need? We want to support the folks that are here, but I think most of the people that own these are they don't live in town, so it just means that this is happening, and I'd hate to see it just all of a sudden, oh, but sorry, nothing we can do about it. It's all done, because it does, I think it does have an impact.
Yep.
I think if we did do a moratorium, first of all, like last 90 days,
Yeah.
but we could, maybe there should be a ad hoc group or whatever that sits and discusses it in general before the council does anything with it.
Yep, we can have some more discussion as council for sure. I mean, one thing that the planning board did do, and the council at the time, and this goes back many different planning boards and many different councils, is the idea of, you know, trying to, you know, look at a town use, and so growing would be actually in particular areas where it wouldn't be, so to speak, storefront areas, or where, you know, people would be, you know, in more of an industrial, it's not industrial, but commercial areas, versus the idea that the storefronts are a little bit different where it's just a retail space. But, I mean, it's definitely worth looking at, and I think it's, you know, we appreciate you bringing it up tonight, and hopefully that, you know, it sounds like there's enough interest on council to at least bring it forward as a discussion to see, you know, if there's another look that needs to be done just to try to develop, you know, what that looks like. Yes, sir? Are you volunteering to actually?
No, I'm not.
I think that's what it
Just
looks like.
I thought that's what he was coming to do, but.
I thought we got a point.
Yeah.
One thing I would not ask the council to keep in mind when whatever your deliberations are is that the way planning board at the time set up the ordinances for the marijuana businesses, they have to be concentrated just by the nature of Lisbon and its geography and the way we passed the zoning for these businesses to be. There's no choice but that we didn't want to put them out into the hinterlands. That was one of the plans behind that. So whatever is in mind, that if we decide that there's going to be a moratorium, that there will only be 6, not 7 marijuana businesses in town, they're going to be concentrated. They have to be. At least the retail side. I can't say the industrial side or the growing side. That's a different cup of tea. But so just please keep all that in mind, unless you want us to wholeheartedly revise all the marijuana ordinances, in which case I'm going home. Because when Councilor Fellows was our chair and we were going through that process, it took a very long time. We made Councilor Smith jump through a bunch of hoops, which he did, and we appreciated that at the time. And it's not an easy process, and as was mentioned earlier, we had, for the hearings, not much turnout. We had more turnout for the solar farm issue than we did for the marijuana issue. And now it's changed because people see it before them, and I'm not unsympathetic to that. My 14 and 12-year-old remark on, is that a skunk or is that something else all the time. So just, this will have a ripple effect. And it will not be a quick or easy process, and there will have to be, in my opinion, in my guess, multiple moratoriums for it to be resolved.
Yep. I think the moratorium is more, that you're describing, is limiting numbers, not location, or rewriting the zoning part of it. So it's an interesting discussion. I mean, there was a few different nights where they talked about the idea of limiting numbers, and one of the hardest things that we have that I listened to the discussion was, name another business in town that you limit the number to. I mean, hair salons, you limit Main Street. I mean, and whether that was a legitimate discussion or not, it was really challenging because you didn't want to, pinpoint one industry of saying, well, we're going to control you. But yet,
discussion of do you limit how many places can sell cigarettes? And
yeah, so there was and the only reason I'm saying that there was quite a bit of discussion that went through that. It wasn't just it's all open in Lisbon and we can do whatever we want. So there was a lot of honest discussion on those properties, whether or not they need to be relooked at it. I mean, things have changed a lot in our community since we started this process. As we talked about earlier, just when it comes to housing, right? The idea of what people are looking for housing, 5 years ago versus now, and so things have changed, and I think that's kind of a reason why we're looking at some of the proposals is for land use. 6 years ago, I mean, we actually had a land use discussion on Route 9, which was totally opposite of what we're talking about right now. They wanted to go the other way with it. They wanted to make it more restrictive and limit a lot of things. So, yes, sir.
My only comment on that, I think, is that it's kind of a false equivalency with a hairdresser and
totally
marijuana,
yeah.
Because it was designed to be restrictive. The state, on a state level, it was designed to be really tightly regulated. So I don't think you have to apologize to marijuana distributors that we were concerned about you because the state set it up that way. And there are towns that eliminated the use totally, depending on where their citizens came out.
So, to be honest with you, the state gave us very little guidance when this came because we looked
for
a lot of it.
I agree with you. So I think there's a learning curve, and I'm saying I think there's been a curve.
Yeah.
Maybe we've learned something, and maybe it's time to look at it again. Instead of just saying, we've done it, and the horse is out of the barn. Well,
I think we look at everything like it does have to be revised. So, we definitely appreciate
your
I appreciate your patience.
If I might add one thing just to alleviate what Mr. Cool said was one of the things that we brought up tonight was going out to RFP for planning services. And this is something that has come up in other communities as well. So I don't think this is something that's going to burden the planning board if it comes up. I think that it's something that could be worth a discussion, especially if we do take on a planner. It could be worth discussion. It could help the businesses that are already here continue to, do good business, and it could also take care of community's concerns as well. So,
thank you. We appreciate you coming in tonight. We really do, because we to be totally honest with you, we very rarely have a lot of public input at our meetings. We usually look at a lot of empty seats, and usually it's the number of people here is usually staff. Come on up, sir. Yes.
I just have a little suggestion.
If you could just come up.
I know this is not really worth standing up for, but I'm sure it's really interesting to see how you guys work, and I appreciate all the hours and hours of work you do. Somebody said, like, oh, wouldn't you run for the town council? And I was like, no, I have a job and a lot of work, and it's a lot. But one small suggestion maybe is that you have the comment section at the beginning of the meeting. I mean, it's fun. It was fun to listen to all this for 2.5 hours, but just that's why I didn't want to come up and say this, because that's all I was thinking. But in terms of the process of of getting you guys to maybe reconsider some of the things, you put all this work into considering it. But if there is a new perspective on it or more awareness of a certain sense about it now, just when I lead the meeting, like, what is the process for initiating that? If that, is it something to go before the planning board? I'm unclear what the next steps are.
So the moratorium would have to be, we would actually probably plan to set it onto another agenda where the council would have more discussion about it. At that point in time, we would have to determine what that plan's for, because it isn't something that we typically actually, a lot of this happened through this process has been kind of off what we typically do. You know what I mean? So the idea of actually for us putting a moratorium on businesses that actually are potentially coming in town is something that, to be honest with you, we've never really had to do before, right? So, how we handle it, do you handle it as far as for businesses that are already, so to speak, invested in town? So if someone 2 years ago bought a piece of property and they're already going through the process and invested money, how fair is it? So there's a lot of different things that we have to look at, and how you put the limits on what this moratorium would actually be. And I'm not sure if the council actually has the tools just out of the blue to pull something like that back together. And as you mentioned earlier to the planning board, it's probably not a planning board process, so it would probably have to be more of a larger discussion if we do bring in, someone that actually is that would be able to help us through that process. Moratoriums are easy to do. It's just one of those things where you don't want to actually cause more grief than good by doing it without being educated on what the process is or who's going to be affected.
The good thing about a moratorium is moratoriums are temporary, and they are intended to give you time to revise something. So if we did adopt a moratorium, we can't go any more than 90 days without being renewed. It can be renewed every 90 days if there's, quote, significant progress being made on whatever your goal is. So I would assume that if we did establish a moratorium, that we would have some kind of direction on who's going to do what next. And then, because you don't want to sit out there and say, okay, 90 days went by, what happened?
You do got to have a goal. Yes, sir.
I understand that Kennebunk put a 6-month moratorium on marijuana growing facilities. Well, in this whole issue, they were able to just do a 6-month. And I would request that you would put the issue on the agenda for the next meeting, just to see if you would discuss it and hold it for 6 months. Because if there are 3 in the wings, there may be 6 in the wings next time. And my concern is that all of the little shops that are vacant could quickly become, well, what are we going to do? They're in the process. Well, moratoriums happen all the time. You have the authority to do that. And I don't think you have to worry about somebody that's dreamed up the idea of starting a growing facility or a marijuana facility here in town. I don't think that's not your job. Your job, I think, is to look at the town as a whole and see if there's a serious concern here. And I think you could have that discussion at a meeting. And in the meantime, there may be some public input.
I'll just give you some highlight of the last time we actually mentioned about moratorium for business, and Bill knows this pretty well because the solar farm was. So we had companies invest tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in that community looking and laying out solar farms and did a lot of work. And potentially we're going to put a moratorium to stop them. And unfortunately, when you lose investors like that, because you just tell them that, the work they're doing. So we just got to be careful. And that started that process, and it didn't actually go that way. We found another route to actually make everything work. So we just got to make sure that we just don't. Our job is to do due diligence and make sure we're making the right decisions. We definitely with the right input.
I think it makes sense to at least put it on the agenda for next time to discuss it and possibly have some language in front of us so we know.
But we do have, as I understand the charter, we have a 90-day limit on moratorium.
But you can do a second moratorium
Yes.
for
Are we looking to regulate just retail storefronts or grows, manufacturing, storefronts all across the board? Because it's a big variance. We could have 20 stores downtown and you wouldn't know we have one grow out in the industrial park. So it's kind of who do we regulate and who decides who we regulate?
I think that's would be up for discussion. It's just
it's a big discussion.
The appearance is what the appearance and and the effects or what
It's,
drive people's opinions.
I think we're getting into the question is balance.
Yes.
And the legislature has seen fit to make marijuana legal. Manufacture, selling, possession. You know, I was a cop here for over 40 years, and it wasn't like that back in the day, but it is now. So the reason I said I was in favor is just because now are we at that point where we got to look at that balance again? I mean, I understand the state threw a rotten apple at us and said, hey, we're making it legal, you guys handle it. So we did what we had to do to make it, to meet the standards of the state. So having said that now, yeah, I think it's just a question of that balance, and I think this is one way to figure that balance out. And we got to have buy-in, we got to have input from the people, and whether that's a general public hearing, whatever we need to do that to get input from the public on it. I think that's important as well.
We'll definitely see if we can put something on to at least have more discussion at an early hour, so you're not here at midnight trying to figure out at the end what's happening, right? And just to let you know, our working rules actually were developed kind of for particular reasons, and we used to actually have open discussion at the beginning of the meeting, and some meetings we didn't actually start doing our agenda until after 10 o'clock at night because the initial part of it actually went way, way beyond, because if there was 20 other people in a room, the discussion could go back and forth for hours. So.
We had meetings that went to 11:30 at night sometimes, and people were just exhausted.
Before we even start our meeting. So with that being said, we do appreciate your input. And again, anybody from the community that wants to come out, and we do appreciate people coming out and voicing their concerns, because it's a lot easier to address it here than it is on social media if we're not looking at social media. You know what I mean? So. Yep. Next item, please.
Next item is audience participation and response for new items. At this time, those in the audience who wish to speak may approach the lectern to address items or issues not on the agenda. Please use the microphone and state your name for the record.
We've just done some of that, but if anybody else? Sir, come on up.
Glenn Mikulowski, Assistant Township Manager. I just wanted to introduce myself. I see we have a new counselor and the public. I started here on Monday, and just give you a little bit of background about myself. Me and my wife moved to Maine last year. Most recently, I was working with the City of Portland, and prior to that, I was an Assistant Township Manager in Maplewood, New Jersey for about 3 years. And I see it's getting late, so I'll be brief, but I just want to say I'm really excited. I want to thank you all for the opportunity. My office is right down the hall. If anyone wants to stop in and say hi, goes for members of the public as well. I'm excited to get to know my colleagues and the residents, and look forward to working with everybody.
I'm glad to have you.
Glad to have you.
Yep.
We'll put you to work.
Absolutely.
He already has.
Yeah, I was gonna
actually.
say, yeah.
He's hit the ground running.
That's a fact. Chief should make sure of that.
What do you know about moratoriums?
I wish the township attorney was here to tell me about state statute, because I don't know anything about state statute with that stuff yet. So.
I'm working. Well, you're learning on it.
You'll learn.
Anything else for audience participation? Anybody have any other concerns or anything they want to address? Seeing no big movement. What's the next item, please?
Next item is executive session. Order 2022-140 to go into executive session per 1 MRSA Section 4056A, personnel matters.
Yeah, our meeting's just getting started. So. Thank
This
you.
is where everybody gets to go home but us.
Yes.
So do we want to take a vote on this?
Yes.
I'll make
I
a
entertain a motion
motion.
going into executive session.
I made it.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? And we're going to remain here, I'm sure.
Okay.
And there will be no vote at the end, so.
Okay.
Turn into a pumpkin.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Bye-bye.
Don't you steal my phone. Don't you be stealing my phone.
So what do you think of your first night, dragging you out? Keeping you...
I just need signatures.
I have, sir. They're done.
Yeah, I stole his pen and halfway through it, and he had to go
Perfect.
back after, so.
That works.
Red lights.
Yeah, red lights on. I entertain a motion to come out of
Make a
executive
motion to
session.
come out of executive
I
session.
second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Good night, folks.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You're going to want to try that pen. That pen that you have. I think we swapped pens somewhere along the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that my point three? My point three tip is what I'm mean. Extra fine. I know where to find you if you have the wrong pen.
Gas prices are up. Oh, it's crazy. And it's never going back down.
No, you know,
What? Gas prices are low. Gas prices are
So,
low.
Fern, on,
They're not low.
I'm going to turn
I
the
saw it.
camera off real quick.
Sorry. Oh, I sent it back to you. I sent it back to you. You did? Yeah.
I think there's a glass of wine calling.
Yeah.